All right, so let me give this, well, see who's on. So I think that Angela is.
Yeah, Angela, we tried to promote you to panelist so you can speak. So I'll try it again, but if you want to accept that, then you can take yourself off and do whatever.
So Al is not here today. Allison is here. Angela's online. Okay, we'll do a call.
It's his birthday. Those birthday?
Al's birthday.
He's not here.
What is it with that?
There's someone else he wants to celebrate.
We're gonna be here to like, geez, Al Cap. I'm first.
Long way for a free lunch.
It was really a lot of food though. Look at that. We got a cake for it. Okay. Welcome everybody to the December meeting of the Massachusetts Commercial Fisheries Commission. Thanks for being here. We're going to do some preliminaries in a minute, but I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Allison for welcoming remarks. And then we'll do some introductions and we'll call them.
Yeah, welcome everyone. And do we know who was present but not in the room?
We will do a roll call in 1 second.
Okay, all right. Yeah, welcome everyone here to SMAST, the home of UMass Dartmouth. And up on the 3rd floor is the DMF space. So it's great to have you all here as well. And so we look forward to today's meeting. Great job by CBI to help develop the agenda, and looking forward to today's discussion.
Just join Dan in the welcome. Really excited for the conversation and looking forward to our last meeting before the holidays and plans to kick off next year.
All right, very good. All right, so let me just do the roll call first and we'll also identify who else is in the room or online. So Al Catone, it's his birthday. Happy birthday, Al, but he's not here. Allison.
I'm here.
Angela is online. Aubrey, I know was in with a family matter on health, but
It's planning to join.
okay, so let's remind me to check back in.
Yep.
Beth, I believe, I don't know if she's feeling may or may not join us. Dan Kiernan.
Yes.
Ed. Barry Canson. Gordon. Paul Layton's calling. Jackie. Katie. Kevin. There's Kevin right there. Pamela. She's with us. Rogers was going to be online, maybe.
Yeah.
Tim Brady. Don't have Tim today. Okay, and Vito. All right, great. All right, so okay, so if folks in the room who are not commission members just want to identify their name and affiliation, that would be great.
My name is Tim Bannock, fishing vessel Odessa. I'm also the president of Northeast Fishing Sector.
Good.
Nick Calabrese, that's Mass.
John Herron. Great.
Stefani Romeo, taking Deputy Commissioner of Fish and Game, and the commissioner should be coming also.
Okay, great.
Todd Callahan, Mass Coastal Office, Coastal Zone Management.
Brad Schalmeyer, Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries.
Bradley Morgan, Division of Marine Fisheries.
Thank you, Gary. You're next.
Carlos Evelyn, Environmental League of Massachusetts.
New McDonald Delta Bay Research Institute.
Jared Silva, Division of Marine Fisheries.
Bob Bland, Division of Marine Fisheries. Corey Reed, Division of Marine Fisheries.
Great, and just so you all know, we've got folks attending online. We've got Angela. We have Aubrey just joined us. Aubrey, welcome. Aubrey, can you hear us okay? Oh, we need to raise Aubrey up to the. We're doing a webinar since it's commission, so we have to take people from attendee to panelist if they're a member. All right, Aubrey, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you. Thanks for joining. Okay, Drew Tarzan, Ellen Sabula, I'm going to mispronounce names. Janessa from UMass Amherst, Kelly Whitmore, Lane Johnston from Rhoda, Melanie Griffin from Mass DMF, Mortillaro Lobster. Sure, I totally mangled that name, but anyway. Spati is here, Steve Cadron, and Valerie Nelson for Lobster. Okay. All right, great. All right. We do need to, let me go through the agenda and we need to approve the agenda. We're going to go through an Innovations Fund announcement, I think from Brad. We're going to go through our focus group work on kind of where we're advancing some of those ideas. We want to talk about this idea. We thought we might have some economic development people this meeting. We did not get them here, but we have a thought about what we need to develop for folks like that and others. We'll get to that. We're gonna talk about working waterfront folks, and have some from folks from Maine will explain why in a bit, and then we need to talk a bit about the annual report we need to produce in early 2026 for this last. All right, any questions on the agenda? Okay. On the minutes, any additions and corrections to the minutes from our last meeting?
You unfortunately need to do a roll call because we're hiding, right, Bradley?
So do a roll call of the minutes?
Yeah, so basically, if you approve, say yes when Pat says your name.
Okay, Allison,
Aye.
Angela, I don't think she's on, so we'll have to try to do her. Aubrey.
Yep.
Great. Dan,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Eric Hansen,
Yes.
Gordon,
Yes.
Holly,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yeah.
Katie.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Yes.
Vito,
Yes.
and then. See if we have anybody who got Angela. Okay, so that's who's here, so that's the. All right. Okay, very good. Got the business out of the way. Very good. Okay, so Brad, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, and you're going to give us an update on the Innovation Fund and letting some research. So,
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you for the opportunity. As we announced earlier this morning at the Fisheries Working Group meeting, we have come to the point in the solicitation process for the Massachusetts Fisheries Innovation Fund, where we can announce the awarded projects. This has been a long process, starting back in, I think, March, when I picked up on the RFP and turned it into something we can hand over to DMF and CZM staff for edits and review back in April and May. We then put it before our Fisheries Innovation Fund Advisory Panel in late May, where they really helped us focus it into what became the first solicitation that was released back in July. So I'll give you some background on the fund specifically on the first slide here. The Innovation Fund was created in 2020 by an EEA and Vineyard Wind agreement. It was a $1.75 million fund that, between the multiple documents that established it, said a lot of things about what the purpose was, including supporting programs and projects that ensure safe and profitable fishing continues, conducting studies on the impacts of offshore wind development on fishery resources, providing grants for technology and innovation upgrades for fishery participants, and amongst other things, and then all where the criteria used to guide the disbursement of the funds will be developed in consultation with the advisory panel. The advisory panel, some of you may know, is a 9-person body made up, chaired by the DMF director and made up of fishing industry from different gear sectors, NGOs, research, seafood processing, port advocacy, and I'm probably leaving something else out there. We had a question about that this morning, so we can clarify that in the future. As I mentioned, in May, our advisory panel really helped us refine what I had drafted and DMF and CZM had commented on as the RFP. They helped us focus that into something that prioritized the projects that benefited and collaborated with fishing industry and kind of de-emphasized research and monitoring projects, acknowledging that funds were available for those priorities elsewhere. That left us with 3 main priorities for that RFP: fishing innovation, community, and safety. Next slide, please. So just a little update on the RFP. It was released July 7th in a fully digital format, so our EEA grants management portal. I was the DMF guinea pig on how to run that. I think I was the first one to run it. Hats off to EEA grants management staff for walking me through that. I think our applicants may have liked the digital process. That RFP closed on August 29th. When I flipped the switch, I saw 20 proposals seeking $3.37 million. Most of the funding, as you can see on that chart, was geared towards the fishing innovation priority, over $1.5 million in requested funding. Community and safety were behind that, and then some projects addressed multiple priorities, and you can see there on the chart. As designed, we review, and as designed and decided by the advisory panel, we reviewed over 2 rounds, both an initial review round and a final review. I had 9 content experts as reviewers from diverse backgrounds, including all eligible and willing members of the advisory panel were able to participate in the final review process. At the end of our final review process, the awards that were recommended to move forward for funding were presented to the trustee, Director McKiernan, and accepted for funding. And that left us with 6 projects and nearly $1.12 million awarded. And without further ado, those projects are 3 fishing innovation projects. The first one, fishing vessel Martha Elizabeth, operated by Captain Wes Brighton out of Menemsha. He'll be working with Coonamessett Farm Foundation on a project called Fisherman-Led Gear Innovation in Southern New England, investigating lighted fish traps. We'll get into more detail on each of these proposals and projects in the next slides here. The second, we're gonna go back, thank you. The second one is Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation, Dr. Dave Cathoni, advancing mechanical jigging to strengthen squid fishery resilience. The third proposal, UMass Dartmouth, SMAS, to Dr. Pingo D's lab, novel fish potting with lights for black sea bass and scup. Community projects include Eating with the Ecosystem, run by Kate Missouri, Real Resilience, strengthening markets for Massachusetts seafood through video and public engagement. Also, the New Bedford Port Authority, partnering with the New Bedford Ocean Cluster, New Bedford Marketing and Promotional Campaign. And then the final project was a safety priority project, Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation, evaluating the hazard of trawling over cable protection mattresses. So that's our 6 projects for $1.169 million. A little more detail. Captain Wes Brighton and Coonamessett Farm Foundation will be developing and testing and monitoring lighted fish traps for finfish, scallops, and possibly squid, with the goal of producing viable gear solutions that can sustain and supplement fishing opportunities in or alongside offshore wind farms. The next project from Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation, partnering with Coonamessett Farm Foundation, fishing vessels Princess Starlet out of New Bedford and Lightning Bay out of Point Judith, as well as Town Dock, Atlantic Shellfish Inc., and Fishing Machine LLC of Japan. They've done the most work on the East Coast about for automated squid jigging, so they'll be leveraging their existing knowledge to streamline deployment and operations of these jig machines in order to maximize catch rates. They'll be developing a standard operating procedure guide to deploying jig gear, both inshore, where they have most experience, near offshore wind farms, and offshore as well. And ultimately, they will create outreach materials and share results with relevant communities and regulatory bodies. Moving on to the next projects. We have another fishing innovation project led by Dr. Pingo He in New Bedford here at SMAS, working with Radar's net manufacturing and the local fishermen. They'll be developing and evaluating fish pots with different LED lights and configurations. They'll use the best performing configuration deployed by a commercial fisherman in an offshore wind array, and they will measure catch performance and describe economic feasibility of a broader industry adoption. Moving on to our community programs, Real Resilience, led by Eating with the Ecosystem and partnering with Tackle to the People, which is a commercial fisherman-owned social or media company. They'll also collaborate with chefs and commercial fishermen to promote Massachusetts harvested seafood like scup, sea bass, pollock, monkfish, Jonah crab, skate, whiting, through public engagement, produced video episodes, including fishermen and chefs, and social media. They will also host 4 public events in Massachusetts where they air the episode screenings and pair it with tastings and panel discussions. And the ultimate goal is to reduce consumer intimidation, grow seafood demand, and build the public support for the fishing industry. Our next community project is the New Bedford Port Authority and New Bedford Ocean Cluster. They'll be putting forward a marketing and promotional campaign for New Bedford fisheries and seafood products in order to strengthen market visibility, consumer awareness, and the brand identity for New Bedford products. This will serve to support local fishermen, enhance New Bedford's competitiveness, and generate measurable economic benefits, not just to New Bedford, but throughout the region. And then wrapping up here, we have the Rhode Island RF program with that's going to work with Superior Trawl net manufacturer out of Point Judith and also a commercial fisherman to assess how different trawl gears and configurations, when towed at different speeds and directions, interact with cable protection mattresses that have become an issue of concern for fishermen in and around Rhode Island waters, and that's not just specific to Rhode Island. They'll be documenting and describing any gear damage, snagging incidents, and movement of cable mattresses, and collecting feedback from fishermen on handling, safety, and performance. One more summary slide here on the, I guess, the details of the project is essentially summing up $700,000 towards fishing innovation, about $400,000 towards community, and a little over $60,000 towards safety. When you slice it and dice it, New Bedford, Cape and Islands applicants are receiving $742,000. The commercial fishing industry receives $375,000 of the funding. Commercial fishing vessel contracts specifically count for $160,000, and Massachusetts commercial fishing industry will receive $236,000 out of the funding. Our next steps are next week. I'll start on contracting and scope of work with the awardees so they can start January 1st if possible. I will bring this back to our advisory panel where we can discuss how to make the process more efficient for applicants and reviewers in the future. We'll talk about the overall funds available for funds like this and projects like this through both our Vineyard Wind and Orsted Mitigation Fund projects, our programs, and consider a future spending plan. And then decide on when our next solicitation will be. At this point, it looks like 2027 might be the best opportunity to do that. And then moving forward, it looks like we could have some project updates in the middle of next year and final results in the middle of 2027. And of course, I'd like to thank all the applicants for the thoughtful proposals that we received, EA grant management staff, all 9 reviewers. They put a lot of time and effort and thoughtful comments into the reviews, and the other DMF staff that helped with this process, because this is my first time doing something like this. I needed a lot of help and I received a lot of it. So thank you all.
Thanks, Brad. Okay, we're gonna go to questions, but first just noting that we've had Beth join us, a commission member, and also Angela. And Angela, can you just test your audio? We think we can hear you. Can you say something? You might have to, is she muted?
Yeah.
Okay, you might have to unmute yourself and say something. Okay.
We heard her briefly.
We heard you briefly, Angela, so when you're ready, feel free to unmute yourself and say hello. Okay, any questions for Brad before we move on? Yeah, let's go Ed and then Jack.
This is a Massachusetts fund, and I noticed that, Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation ended up with, a sizable amount of money. And
I'll just a little louder.
that is it's a fund that's based in Rhode Island. So I'm curious whether going forward, are we going to prioritize Massachusetts applicants, seeing this is a Massachusetts fund, or how's that going to work?
So through the discussions that we had, who would be eligible to apply to this fund with the advisory panel, the prioritization was towards the impact that and the knowledge gained for Massachusetts fishermen versus only Massachusetts entities being eligible. So that was the decision that was made in concert with the advisory panel, the overall impact that could be delivered to Massachusetts fishermen. So it didn't disqualify applicants from other states. I I appreciate your comment and I understand and you're not the only one who's brought that up. The fact that, one of those Rhode Island CFRF projects was working with a New Bedford dragger, was not, was notable. So, but I take your comment. I think the cable mattress issue specifically is something that crosses state lines. It's a safety issue that we can all learn specific things from. So I hope that answers your question.
And nothing against, Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation. I'm just saying that, it is supposed to be
Understood?
We made,
targeted towards Massachusetts fisheries.
thanks. And Jackie?
Just out of curiosity, in the projects in southern New England, how prevalent is cable mattresses? I know that's something that'll probably be considered more in the north when, and I know that there's a depth preference and recommendation for construction with cables, but I'm just curious. I know there's been areas just in general when cables are coming to shore that they may reach an area where they can't maintain that depth, but is this something that is prevalent in a lot of the areas that are operating or being constructed in the southern area?
Multiple factors. And right now we only have 2 projects that really have cables going north into southern New England. Vineyard Wind, who were able to reach burial depth at most locations. The only places they weren't were really close to shore, Collier's Ledge, where there are 3 mattresses that are not in fishable depths. So that's one project. The other one is Revolution, where they do have quite a few cable mattresses, West Passage, Narragansett Bay, and then further out towards, Brenton and those, the areas south of Aquidneck Island. So yes, there are quite a few mattresses there. Developers are on the record saying they are not concerned. Fishermen don't need permission to fish over them, but I think we know that fishermen don't want to lose expensive nets and gear around them. So while not speaking for the fishermen, I think more confidence needs to be generated about the impact of towing around these areas. And I think a lot of people are happy to see it being done through, through tests of different sweep sizes, different speeds and orientations before fishermen lose nets.
Brad, a question. If a fisherman entangles a gear in a mattress, is that compensable through the gear mitigation program?
I don't want to speak for the developer.
All right.
Maybe worth on. Let's go to Ed and then let's keep moving to the working group update. Ed.
Always like is an extremely important
It is.
way to spot them.
Yep.
7 days. And there is a lot, there can be a lot
I'll
of.
show you where the mattresses are. I'm pretty sure you haven't towed there.
We do have a break, so perhaps this could happen.
Yep.
Then, okay. All right, let's move to focus group updates. For those that are less familiar with this commission, we have a few working groups, one on pork profiles, another work area happening around flounder processing, and then a group on offshore wind. Let's see who's up first. Story, I think we have you for the pork profiles.
Yep, the story come close, so.
Yes, we can. hear you.
Have a couple slides.
That's great. We'll just look at this zero.
Okay, so this will be pretty quick. The port profile focus group actually didn't meet since the last meeting, but the port profile itself, the work is ongoing. So since the last meeting, the harvester survey was emailed out to DMF's commercial fishing permit holder list and our for-hire permit holder list. And they were first sent out on November 7th with 2 follow-up emails after that, 2 reminders. So as of 2 days ago, we had 560 responses to the fisherman survey, which is really good. I think 5 years ago, we had significantly less than that in the 300 to 400 response range. So that was good. And the team at Urban Harbors that is collecting this data kind of went through it to make sure it looked like the geographic representation up and down. That's good.
They can show you.
And then the Harbor Master survey was emailed out to the Harbor Master list at the beginning of November, and about 2/3 of those have been submitted by the Harbor Masters, which is great, and follow-ups are ongoing with the team that's working on it. So that's great to have that data coming in now and almost all collected. And then on the fisheries statistics and permitting side, our DMF stats team has that analysis underway. So, back to the timeline, we are trying to do this.
Just click the arrow to it should be.
All these mice here. So there we go. Good. So we're right on schedule with the timeline for the project. So finalizing the survey work is being finalized now, analyze those results over the next couple months and start writing the report. So there may be an opportunity for this focus group of this CFC to get together over the winter if we have any open questions or want some direction on the report. If anything interesting comes out that we want more feedback on, we'll certainly call on this group. But this project is well underway.
Great.
Questions?
Questions for Stuart? Yeah, Ed.
So on the commercial fishing responses, do you have any kind of breakdown as to like gear or, fishery?
I don't. We can get that soon. And that's a good thing. We'll check on that to make sure we have good coverage. But we just kind of did this quick search through it. It looked good. I just don't have the numbers on that. Both geographically and fisheries.
But more coming, right? More, you'll be able to tell that.
Oh, yeah. Yep, for sure. And if we found any weaknesses, Ed, we try to target some. So it's a good question.
Oh, was that a hand game? Yeah. Other questions? Okay, then I would say keep going to flounders.
All right, the flounder processing focus group did meet on Monday, and we had a good meeting. In that, we had Al Catoni, Roger Berkowitz, Safathia, and Frank Meraki, who's not part of this group, but we had and then several DMF staff. So we had a good call to try to kind of hone in on what this group wants to focus on, and we kind of came up with 3 things, but 2 that we're going to do some work on before the next focus group meeting in January. And that's reaching out to processors to find out what their choke points are. Is it infrastructure? Is it labor? What are the barriers that the processors are facing? So the group came up with a list of processors to contact. So we're going to start working on that. Also, marketing, I thought that might be like the second part of this, but Al was able to provide information that, for example, right now, the price of gray soles dropped considerably recently. So marketing what's being caught and processed now became a priority right in that call. So Roger and Wendy are going to work on some ideas for media and social media advertising, also reaching out to consumers and chefs. So those 2 efforts can go on simultaneously. So a bunch of good ideas came out of the meeting on that, and we'll work on that. And the other, something that Safathia always champions, is trying to get SNAP accepted in seafood retailers. So that's kind of a project that's been ongoing that we'll continue to work on the side and provide updates on that. So this group will get back together in late January and talk about the progress that's being made. But I think we've got a path forward in some of these things in between.
Great. Thanks, Story. Okay, questions again, and for folks online, either just take yourself off mute or raise your hand and we'll be sure to come in. Are we doing non-commission questions?
Let's get quick. Let's get at the table here, and then if we have time, we can do.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to talk about the marketing piece.
Okay, Angela.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. First of all, I really want to apologize for all these months, but I've been on medical leave, but I'm back to the work. And these months have really helped me think about the different things that I hear now today. And it goes back to what we always did back in 1972. We need to educate the public. They have no clue about anything. But they also say, well, if I knew, I would try this fish. So I really, not at this, I just wanted to give you that piece of information. But next time I will have more, or between the meeting, we can talk a little bit more, because we, meaning GFWA and FP, we are changing, we are not putting up there the fishermen. What we are putting out there first is the ocean that needs to be protected, the food that we need to provide. That's the biggest responsibility that we have in all of this, that we need. What we're doing is not just save the fishing industry, it's the food that we need to feed people with. It's the only natural protein around in the world. And in this area, we have plenty of everything, but the public has no clue. There's a fish that you can eat. The pollock is a fish that you can eat. And skates is a fish that you can eat. We really need to do a huge campaign about educating the public and let them know that what we're doing is to feed them and the rest of the world.
Thanks, Angela. It's great to hear your voice. I don't know, Story, maybe you could include Angela in the
Yeah,
working group
yeah.
if there's room.
That's
And-
the idea of the marketing piece, so we will,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay, so we can try to connect you, Angela, with Story in this focus group so you can share your marketing ideas. Thank you. All right, any other
Okay.
commissioners with questions or comments? Jackie,
Sorry,
and
just
then
out of curiosity, thinking about Al's concern on Monday with the gray soul price, I haven't looked at prices for weeks and so I don't know really what's going on, but does the state track that at all? Is there any, any opportunities economically through the state to be able to track that? I mean, because a lot of times, you know, we really don't know what creates these drops in price. It's like this phantom thing. You would assume with the holidays around the corner, prices would remain pretty high. A lot of finger pointing happens with price dropping. And, you know, too much being landed at once, or, imports, or like, so much that goes on, but
Fishing behavior right now is bringing in more gray soul, and he can describe it to you better, but I mean, we track ex-vessel prices, year over year and throughout the year. I don't know if that's exactly what you mean, but, and if we can all look at that and try to figure out maybe what's driving it. I mean, that's the $1 million question, like you just said, but we do track that. And it's pretty easy for us to output that, to update that regularly. Like we did it recently for lobster because we heard about the low price of lobster, right? So obviously it bears out in the data, but you can see it versus previous years and things like that can be helpful.
Jackie, is there like a potential next step of a recommendation that you would want to see?
We talk about marketing and prices, and I'm just wondering how that targeted in some way that, if there's any way to track what's occurring that creates the problem, and you can go to the source and try to pick it up. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of how to really focus efforts so that we're really targeted in any sort of programs that we might recommend or consider. Just worried about, I'm just curious about identify what the problem is so that, and maybe if there isn't a way to do that, but.
Well, and it changes too, right? Right now it's gray sole and lobster and it changes.
Right.
So it's hard to predict sometimes because we don't know what drives it necessarily.
Yeah. With whiting this summer, this fall, there was an issue with a lot of Canadian imports coming in that really dropped the price on whiting. But
I mean,
there was like some specialty Nova Scotia market that all of a sudden there was that really dropped our price when the fishing was really good. So there was, an okay summer, and then all of a sudden there was this stall out this fall. But just being able to understand.
I'll share with you some of the data we have. Obviously, it's looking backwards.
Yeah.
But it can be comparative year over year.
Let's go to Vito and then Ed.
So I had someone that I could ask, because I don't follow fish prices. I don't fish anymore, and I'm not in the fish business, but I know people that are. So the last 2 weeks, this is the volatility. first, everyone has to understand how the market works. It's a spot market. It's every day, it's fresh. And if it's not sold in the next 24 or 48 hours, it's gonna go on fire sale. So all fish dealers move the fish at what the spot price is that day, get the best they can from whoever's driving the market, right? A nice run, this is what I got, nice run of small grays, like 105 count. So that's basically 1 pound fish, right? Is there 100 pound? $2 plus. That's considered a nice run, 1 pound, gray sole smalls. Small stuff like a lot of the boats have been bringing in, is 130 to 145 count. For now, the fish buyers and inspectors all send graders into the coolers and they dump a whole tote out and they count them. And then they relay that back to the processor that they're working for. And they know that's more labor, that's less of a, fillet size. They get certain customers that want certain sizes. That's $1.30 to $1.50. That's round weight to the vessel. Medium and large are $4.50 to $6. So small grays, when there's a big run, came in at $2 to $3.50 for small grays. This is just in the last 2 weeks. There's been that kind of volatility, and there's nobody sitting at the dock able to control any of that. Fresh fish offloaders have to sell to whoever's buying, and the market dictates it. Price discovery happens every day, and it happens multiple times through the day. So, to try to manipulate or control that, need an end market that is looking to buy a finished product at a certain price, at a certain volume. And for the few fishermen we got left, they're gonna see price stability and make it work. So.
Thanks for the live data, Vito.
What's that?
Thanks for the live data.
Yeah.
Yeah, the intel. Okay, let's go to Ed and then to the offshore wind focus group.
I was just curious what data sets you were using to divine out fish prices, because as Vito will tell you, the benefit price might be different than, we don't have, well, there's still an auction in Gloucester, I'm not even sure.
There's still the old Gloucester auction, Cape Ann auction.
And, Whaling City has an auction, but there are other, some people aren't going to auctions. Boston doesn't have an auction. So I'm just curious as what you're using.
We would use the data coming in from all dealers stably. So it'd be an average price. I mean,
So they're reporting.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yes, I think we're good.
Okay, while you're gonna develop slides, they're coming to the back maybe briefly,
Yes,
if you call
thank
the slides, yeah. Sure, yeah.
This is an excellent program, the Massachusetts Food Security Grant Program. Unfortunately, 85% of the funds go to the farmers. We need a program that's directed towards the fishing industry, which will help with your marketing and processing of the end product.
And that program, that is run through Department of, is that run through part of that?
can I add 2 cents to that?
Yeah.
That's a good point, and we advocate for seafood to get a piece of that. And I could see the work that this group does in trying to prioritize infrastructure needs. We can feed that to them to help, align the priorities of what's needed for the seafood industry with that grant program. So I agree, we need to leverage that and programs like that more.
For a national program for all your work.
Yeah, and yes.
We do have time for Ed, partly because we need to
All
find
right,
this one.
real quick, just, food security program, I think, is a topic that this commission should be devoting a fair amount of time to in the future. I think you need to have an in-depth discussion about food security grant program.
Okay. Let's put it on the list. Yep. Did we find the slides? All right, and I got that down. It's actually up. Is there anybody in particular you'd want to come and talking about it with us, or just among ourselves?
Amongst ourselves.
Okay.
Amongst us experts.
Exactly. Okay. All right.
All right, well, Brad is gonna get into the Zoom to share the slides, but Katie and Brad, I think you both are presenting on the offshore winds. Is that great? Katie, do you want to intro while we get these slides?
Is it okay if I just, stay here?
Yeah.
I sort of have my own.
Yeah,
Just
as long as you
talk
speak
about it.
loud.
I will, okay, all right. So the subgroup here have come up with, I'm sorry, my slides are chart of rough. Different, objectives to learn from the Southern New England area to implement here or take into consideration here. For offshore wind, off Massachusetts. Brad, did you get it? Did you want to start with those first?
Sure.
Or do you, if you don't, I can go here. I can start with that.
I'm working on the slide.
Okay.
right now.
I'll just start off with the first. Okay, so there are 5 main objectives that we come up with that we're gonna focus on. One is learn from the construction projects in the Southern New England area. 2 is build a better understanding of fishing behavior.
Kitty, can I pause you for 1 second?
Sure.
In front of people, there's 2 documents. One is the agenda and the second one is the written version
Yes.
of this. So if you want to follow along now.
So that would be good because I have, so some of the slides we put together are pretty wordy, so I'm gonna just hit on the main topic.
Perfect.
I know we're stressed for time. 3 is develop best practices for the implementation of AIS and the project arrays. 4, develop a statewide strategy for offshore wind development and commercial fisheries. And 5, improve the economic and compensatory mitigation analysis and administration. So the first one I'll hit on is 1, learn from the constructed projects in the Southern New England area. With this, we would like to develop methods to track the actual effects of offshore wind development on the fishing industry and the fishermen that are fishing in and around the existing arrays, and use that evidence to improve the layout, construction practices, mitigation, and methodology assumptions. So we would do this by support, track, and learn from the Mass CEC funded New Bedford Port Authority FMAS 12 test. Support NOAA and NIMS in developing metrics and using existing VMS and VTR to better understand vessels' response to the built project arrays over time. I think we're all aware of the NOAA budget issue and their constrained resources, so we would advocate for DMF to support the work and work with NOAA and NIMS to advance this understanding, reporting out at least once a year on the results through consulting experts as appropriate. If possible, also gather information about fishing behavior during the length of the project's construction through both data review and the fisherman's reported experience. On the offshore wind impact of fisheries and fishing habitat, support the Mass Fishery Working Group and continue to gather learnings from ongoing monitoring done by offshore wind projects being built. The Mass Fishery Working Group should track, receive, and review at least annual updates on the various monitoring studies in and around the arrays carried out by the developers. And let me just go down here. No later than 3 years after the completion of construction in Southern New England wind energy area, the Vineyard One and Rep Wind, the Commission should prepare an RFP with DMF jointly to procure a reputable and trusted contractor to provide input to that contractor and issue a report to the Commission, DMF, BZM, and the legislature.
Nice job. Take a breath.
I know we're crushed for time.
I'll take the next couple slides here. The next objective that was discussed in the focus group was to build a better understanding of fishing behavior earlier in the process regarding Gulf of Maine leases, as well as floating offshore wind technological development and potential impacts. And I think we heard a lot about this from Hannah McDonald, GMRI, this morning. They essentially by proxy, along with Maine, are kind of running point on this. They've put a lot of resources towards it. So we should be working with them, NOAA and fishermen to gather the data. And Vito and Jackie have already done a lot of this work for the Gulf of Maine siting process. Data including VMS, VTR, AIS chart plotter to geospatially, seasonally, annually identify fishing behavior in and around the Gulf of Maine leases that weren't excluded from during the siting process to help shape future monitoring, array design, transit corridors, et cetera, as appropriate. So coordinating with other Gulf of Maine states, engaging with GMRI to understand what they're learning. And once again, they are running point on this. Working with our Massachusetts fishermen to ensure that their data and their work compiled for the Gulf of Maine energy planning area continues to inform studies, tracking floating offshore wind technology development, such as anchoring system, floating structures, cable arrangements, to consider what impacts might arise once again, drawing on what GMRI, has been doing. And then also there's a suggestion of reviewing Rhoda's synthesis of science 2 documents, which, focus specifically on the Gulf of Maine. Moving on to another objective that we've kind of fleshed out and have decided to work on a little bit more is developing developing best practices for the implementation of AIS in project arrays. The current guidance from the Coast Guard and the rest of the feds is that AIS signals are to indicate each significant peripheral structure, SPS, not to exceed 3 nautical miles in distance apart, and may mark other intermediate peripheral structures or other offshore wind infrastructure, and that marking of all structures is not prudent. If you look at the bottom left figure there, that's from a US Coast Guard document. The significant peripheral structures are the red marked turbines. The intermediate ones are the blue marked turbines on the periphery, and then the interior towers are the green ones. The guidance would mandate that the red ones are marked, the blue ones may be marked, and the green ones wouldn't be marked, because it wouldn't be prudent. Now, industry and even developers have brought up the fact that this allows for inconsistent implementation, based upon the size and shape of the offshore wind farm. On the bottom right is Revolution as it's currently being built, and South Fork is on the southwest side of that. I think we can all agree that something like Vineyard Wind that has 4-ish sides to it is probably pretty easy to find out what a significant peripheral structure is, and maybe even the intermediate peripheral structures. But Revolution Wind is kind of a different animal. We can debate whether it's a roadrunner or a bird or whatever, but it's kind of hard to tell, especially if you're a mariner going through there for the first time transiting, where you'd expect AIS to be affixed. So the guidance that currently allows for inconsistent implementation between projects that may even be adjacent to each other could create confusion among mariners. We just had a chat about it during lunch here. Not just fishermen, but researchers, mariners, anybody else that uses these areas might benefit from more AIS on all, or AIS on just the bare minimum. So I think we want to use the CFC to accept or review the guidance that we get from a smaller focus group. We want that focus group to be to solicit comment from fishermen, mariners, experts on electronics, regulators, developers, and then elevate those concerns and that guidance to the Coast Guard. I've had recent phone calls with the Coast Guard who deals with AIS. They are open to updating their guidance, which is 2 to 3 years old right now. It talks about transit fairways through wind farms. Their only concern is that they don't want to implement clutter on other people's, they don't want to create one problem out of another. They don't want to make clutter on plotters and rainers for no reason. So that's where we are on this project. I feel like January is a good time to start convening a focus group of experts and wind farm users so that we can elevate that guidance to the CFC. It would really be an important body to elevate a request for updated guidance to the Coast Guard, who are amenable to doing so. So that's where we are on that. That actually has some legs behind it. Moving on to the fourth objective, developing a statewide strategy for offshore wind development and commercial fisheries. The Commercial Fisheries Commission, under this objective, would identify the various mechanisms for meaningfully integrating the input of fisheries into offshore wind development. And this could include, but is not limited to, CZM consistency review, power purchase agreements, state procurement process, and research funding. They'd like to develop guidance for other tools to inform offshore wind development and fishing in Massachusetts for the future. And there's a recommendation to check Rhoda's guidance documents and reach out to the Rhode Island FAB on their experiences as well.
Brad, the California's crossed out. Do you want to say more about that?
I think that was your X out because you had, Was that something you wanted to remove from this, or is
No.
that?
I think I must have just, no, I must have been, I'm not sure I got mixed up. It should
Sure,
be.
my misunderstanding.
Okay.
The California offshore wind review strategy.
Yeah, that, I think it's useful for this group. It'll be out in public in February. I'll send it out to everybody. It's the only state who's developed a kind of statewide strategy about fishing will engage with offshore wind vis-a-vis the coastal commission, which in that case is like CZM has CZM authority. So I think it's worth reviewing that document and seeing if that's intriguing or not, along with these other pieces. So we'll send that out.
Okay, my mistake there.
No problem.
All right,
In February?
February.
that's as much as I'm gonna talk for now. I'll pass it back to Katie.
Okay. Lastly is to improve economic and compensatory mitigation analysis and administration. And this would be to better reflect the actual financial impacts on fishing, which include shoreside services, and reevaluate the assumptions for data, like multipliers, which fishermen will continue using within or near arrays, construction, post-construction impact. So this is a big one, I will say, for me, having a company in Rhode Island and going through this already. Some of these points will hit on it, but reaching out to other groups who have been through this already is going to be super helpful when going through this and trying to come up with your own plan. First one is work with state and federal officials to track ongoing permitting reform in the US Congress and consider potential federal legislative ideas for reforming the statutory underpinnings of fishery compensation for offshore wind and commercial fishing. I know that Rhoda has done some comment letter writing on this as well, so might even help to reach out to us for some advice there. Gather learnings from existing compensation programs like the Rhode Island Fishermen's Future Viability Trust. You have two members, myself and Fred Matera, who are on the Fisheries Working Group that would be happy to talk about this too. As we've been through this and continue to go through this with several companies through mitigation and managing that money. Learn from Rhoda about their experience with the Fishery Knowledge Trust and how it might be used to inform such methodologies. Sorry about my reading, my mouth is dry. I did reach out to, thank you, Jack. To Pat about this, because listening to some of the discussions we've had so far, it sounds like it might be worth reaching out to Rhoda with this program, and it might help us along the way with certain initiatives. And lastly, we will develop an initial scope for an economist to review the existing methods for developing compensatory mitigation and answer specific questions with the intent of improving the accuracy of these methods, as well as how to apply these methods to subwork, such questions might include how can more socio and community impacts be considered, analyzed, and quantified in these methods? In what fisheries is there sufficient VMS or similar data to improve the VTO data based on NOAA Fisheries book data? How can such assessments better address or data for species, fisheries? And I might not be able to get this last one here. Doesn't fit. Here we go. There you go, if you can find it. How can these assessments account for more cyclical fisheries where data may misrepresent fishery activity during shorter reference periods? We kind of touched upon that today. And I think when the fishery working group was going through, I think it was Vineyard Wind was the first time you all were going through a compensation plan. Fred and I had kind of given you guys a heads up of what it was going to be like going with their accountant versus your accountant. And again, that was a tough lesson to learn, and it's not an easy fight. But again, drawing from other groups that have been through this, there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and I think we should use it. So it can only help us here. Thanks, Katie. And thanks to the whole offshore wind working group. These are the discussion questions or something. Okay, I just want to, so checking in on time. Do you want to go through?
I think what we'd like to do is just, this is, I think, what would go in, it want to be tracked some of our work we'll be doing together, and it will also go into the report at the end of the year, which will be early 2026. So is there anything we missed, anything you disagree with, anything that you want to add that, from these, or does this look pretty good as a kind of comprehensive set for the work that the group did?
I have a question on the best practices for AIS. If you put up that chart that you showed of Revolution Wind with all the towers are listed there, if you took only the ones that had AIS, would you be able to tell which ones didn't? Because it's so convoluted, there's places there are no targets, no AIS, because there's nothing there. And now you'd have spots where there's no targets, but there is something there.
Well, they should be on your plotter because you're updating your plotter file, right?
Okay.
It should be there as a turbine marked on your plotter, on the NOAA file. Your radar should pick up a signal from it as well, but it would not have AIS.
Right, but I mean, now if there's a vessel there where maybe you thought there was a tower, but now it's a vessel.
Yeah.
They're not required to have AIS, some of them.
Right.
So how do you tell which one's moving, which one's stagnant? That's the problem with. I think the clutter issue could be addressed by scale.
Right.
That's what happens with radar.
Yep, absolutely.
You just lower the scale and the clutter goes away because now you don't have such a big picture to look after. I'm still in favor of AIS on every tower. And I think having some out there without is gonna cause a lot more confusion than the clutter issue would be.
And these are the type of comments we're looking to aggregate, because not everybody agrees with that sentiment. But I think we want to make sure that the clutter wouldn't be an issue because it can be dealt with through different types of electronics and different filters and settings. And that it is an opportunity or an option for people who would like it on every trade line. So I don't want to guide the discussion one way or the other, but the reason this whole issue came up is because of inconsistent implementation, and developers say, just tell us what to do. We have no problem with doing it either way.
Yeah, but got Katie and Kevin.
So I knew it has been a while, but Rhoda did do, not to keep plugging Rhoda, but to keep plugging Rhoda. So years ago, we had a joint industry task force, which the offshore wind energy companies ended up walking away from. But before that happened, we were able to get a couple of discussions and projects done here. I don't want to call them projects, these working papers. But one of them was recommendation for aids to navigation back in 2020. So it might be worth having to look at and see, what the group.
That's what actually started this initiative, because I've been in touch with Lane and we've used that as the kindling for this.
Great.
And in that report, which was really good work, it covered a number of other marketing things too, is
Yes.
we could never get to the answer probably because the Coast Guard wasn't clear
Yeah,
about
that
what
was tough.
the ballgame.
Yeah, and the National Academy of Science had a document on that, on radar as well. That those things, it didn't really cover squalls and inclement weather very well on it. My question, right, there was, for this, are you thinking of it in terms of transit or in terms of fishing? I think putting the AIS on it, because it'd be.
How efficient is that? Yeah. Eric, others, if there's, however, is that mostly just to navigate around or through, or is it for some other?
It would be both. I think.
AIS also gives you collision warnings.
Right, and you also have to remember, AIS unit has multiple ways to display.
Yep.
You can put it on a screen like a radar, you can put it onto a plotter. You can also get, when you acquire the target, how it's listed, how close it is on a scale, which one shows up first. So there's multiple ways to display the AIS information. But if you can open it on a radar screen, at least you can, verify what you're looking at.
You get vessel name, course,
Right.
speed, all that stuff, which is important in case you want to, hail that vessel or whatnot. So, anybody that would like to be in that focus group meeting, the more the merrier. I think we're all working for the same outcome. And if not, then I want to hear that even more.
Any other questions or other things to add to this? Otherwise, we're gonna kind of fold this into the year report. And there's some things we'll need to follow through the year in terms of actions, so.
All right. Okay, let's move to the next item on the agenda here, which is a discussion about creating a briefing on the commercial fishing industry that could be shared with either the Executive Office of Economic Development or the Massachusetts Office of Business Development or anyone else who's looking for an economic rundown of the importance of commercial fishing. There was originally a push to try to get this presentation ready for this meeting because we were hoping to have some of those staff attend. That did not end up happening for a variety of like family and holiday reasons, but we think this will happen in the future. And regardless of folks coming to this meeting, we think having a briefing like this ready to go will be important. The fact that they weren't able to come today is actually perhaps a benefit, and that we can take a step back and think about what really needs to be in this presentation, who needs to be contributing parts of it. So we're gonna have some time for discussion. Gordon, do you wanna kick it off any more than that as someone who had this idea?
Yeah, sure, because, I think I said at our first meeting, one of the real values I think we have of this Commercial Fisheries Commission is actually to present to decision makers and policymakers and all that kind of stuff, the industry as an industry, not as a regulated fishery, right? Like the job creation and the economic impact that comes out of this, at least as far as I know, isn't really aggregated in any particular way, right? We have some of it from the Port Authority because a big economic impact analysis was done, now somewhat dated, right? So I'm still bragging about 2018 data on slides, and someday I'd like to update that, but we at least have some of that on, tax revenue generated and jobs and all that kind of thing on both commercial fishing and the processing side. And I think it would be great to be able to get as much of that from as many people on the Commercial Fisheries Commission for the different fisheries that you all work on. It won't all be apples to apples. We're not all going to have the same data, but I think that's fine because, what we're trying to show is the sort of the expanse of the impact. For example, one of the things that I'm going to try to do my best to capture when I was at Massport, one of the pieces of information that I got was in terms of belly cargo coming through Logan Airport, which is the cargo that goes through passenger planes, not freight aircraft. Seafood was the number 2 value belly cargo coming in and out of Logan Airport, right? Medical devices, which is basically by Boston Scientific stents, which are like this big, was number 1, but seafood's number 2, right? So, and that goes somewhere. A lot of it comes to New Bedford to get processed, and then it goes back out again, right? So the footprint for the kind of seafood and processing impact, I think is a lot bigger if we can start pulling some of these things together. I make numbers up when I say, but I do it for effect, right? Something like 90% of the stuff that is landed in New Bedford is probably processed in New Bedford, right? But probably only about 25% of what's processed in New Bedford is landed in New Bedford, right? Like, so there's a lot of trucks coming back and forth and all that kind of thing. And so there are jobs associated with that, and there's revenue associated with that and all that kind of thing. And I'm sure you all, even if it's anecdotal, like that's the kind of stuff that I would love to wrap up. So when the state's doing its next economic development plan, the words commercial fishing show up in it somewhere. Like that would be a win for us because it doesn't today. And we started to think about this, and to Abby's point, it was kind of a relief, right? Because you don't really know what you want to do until you start getting into it. I was convinced that I could easily find data which I thought existed in the NOAA landings database, and Jackie and I talked about this. Like, I was driving myself crazy because I was pretty sure that they reported the landings, by catch by port, right? And I can find landings by port, and I can, but I don't know if it's actually broken down by that much, and I think it is. So there's some data that I think we would still like to kind of gather if we can, and talk about it. And then the other half of the presentation, I think, though, is what are the pressures that all these different fisheries are facing, whether they are environmental or they're regulatory or a combination or what have you, or is it a marketing gap? What is, to Angela's point, like, how do we get people to fish for more pollock? Like what would that do, on the downstream sort of economic impact? We're not ready to do the presentation, we just kind of laid out, but, that's what I think if we can actually put together and put in front of the economic development officials and then just have, right, for any legislator or any policymaker, you know, that's interested in this stuff, and we can start promoting it as well. So that, from a free association perspective, is what, I was hoping we would get to at some point. So it doesn't have to be a tomorrow solution, but I don't know, lots.
All right, so let's open it up. Great, Dan has a hand, and I know so anyone curious, like if there are elements of this presentation that you think would be important, if you want to be part of developing, that's great. I know some of you have already started brainstorming on this, and to hear some of your takeaways would also be helpful, but let's go to Dan first.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by some of the issues you've raised, because we know if we drive on the highways, there's all these expressway, we see so many seafood trucks, so we know there's a lot of fish that's coming in from overseas. We know and the EPOs tell us how much fish is coming in from other states into the port of New Bedford. But how would we get that? Because I don't think any government agency is like tracking the amount of fish that a New Bedford processor would be processing. And so it's a really important data set, but how do we get it? Story, are you familiar with how NIMS is generating like seafood jobs? Because we use that in the CARES Act. Massachusetts got a huge bump up in the the amount we were able to give out because we had such a big seafood processing sector.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different things. It's wrapping your head around the processed fish coming in. Somehow, we can read about it. No one comes up with every 5 years or so, they update the total seafood jobs by state, and it includes all the sectors you're talking about, I think. But backing that out and getting the amount of fish being moved around, coming in and out, I don't know how they do that, because there's multiple data sets. And I'm not sure, you know, exactly what they are.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm trying to boil the ocean, to use the term, right? Like maybe we're trying to do too much here, right? Because there are a lot of jobs that are probably in ship repair, you know, and vessel repair and maintenance that may not be captured by that data, but are really dependent on the commercial fishing industry, right? So, this may be a longer or a bigger task.
Maybe a question to folks in the NOAA economics branch about how they're tabulating seafood jobs, because maybe at a higher level, less granular, maybe that data is already there. You know what I mean? Maybe you could save yourself a lot of work, especially if Massachusetts is already being credited with a ton of seafood processing jobs. I don't know.
So that's one element of what could be included. Let's go to, is that a hand in?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's a sad.
I forgot what I was gonna say.
We can come back if you.
I guess, best to just come back.
Okay, Aubrey, oh, good. I was just gonna put you on the spot and you have a hand up. Do you want to share? I know you started to think about this. Do you want to
Sure.
share how that went? Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of jumped around, but just I know in terms of like Cape Cod, you know, I was trying to look at the data that we had, and something that immediately I went to was the old port profile project. And I know that that's currently being updated, like Story gave that update, but I think that will be really useful in terms of highlighting different ports and values of landings, but also like, for example, Barnstable County as a whole. So, you know, I know in 2021, Barnstable County seafood landings were close to 52 million and was 74.5 million ex vessel value. And so that represented 9% of Mass state landings. And to me, that's second largest in the Commonwealth fishing landings by ex vessel value, second only to New Bedford. And I always find that impressive, given that the Cape Cod represents small boats and a variety of different vessel sizes. And I think considering that it's exclusively small business owners, the economic impact of the Cape's fisheries is more impressive. So I always like to say that when giving a presentation. I also, looking at data, so I had the Port Profile Project. I know Gordon mentioned the Atlantic Coast Cooperative Statistics Program, the safest data set. So that helps with getting state information by species, pounds, dollars, but it is a course, and sometimes a lot of that information is confidential. So it'll tell you what percentage of the data you actually have access to. I always find working with Story and Mass DMF, there's ways we can get some of that information as well, but those are the data sources that came to mind. In terms of working waterfront challenges, I think, shallow water and the need for dredging, lack of affordable moorings for commercial use, the need for more space to load and unload catching gear, and parking were one of them. I know we'll have a presentation later today, but this June in Maine, the Representative Morgan Riley created a working waterfront advisory council, and they also established a working waterfront information and technical assistance fund. And that was to spread awareness of Maine's working waterfronts. So the funds were used on promotional tools such as brochures, advertisements, and campaigns explaining the importance of working waterfronts and how best to protect them, along with being used to provide technical assistance. So I'm wondering if we could do something similar in Mass. That was a suggestion. And then I have just 3 more points, about economic development. So one with climate change and adaptation. I thought we should establish a low interest rate loan program for independent owner operators to purchase things like gear, vessel upgrades with terms that reflect the needs of the industry. The scale of loans required by fishermen is larger than a micro loan, but small enough that banks sometimes do not customize terms to be accommodating to the seasonal cash flows of the fishing industry. So making traditional small business borrowing is infeasible. So finding ways to address that. I think we need to further invest in working waterfront infrastructure to support commercial fishing businesses, whether that's internet upgrades at piers, waterfront access specifically for commercial fishing businesses, dredging for harbors, cold storage and ice making and seafood processing, and then making a dedicated grant program to support Mass fishing industry research collaborations with Mass research institutions. So those are a few ideas in terms of climate change adaptation. In terms of regulatory streamlining, I think we should do a mandatory periodic review of state regulations with sensitivity for how changes to state regulations will impact small businesses of the commercial fishing industry, and also streamline the permitting requirements so that fishermen can participate in processing, selling, and transporting seafood. Oftentimes, they have to get the approval of Mass DMF and the Department of Public Health and or the county or municipal boards of health, and that complexity most often deters fishing businesses from expanding to direct-to-consumer sales. And so that's something I think we could have influence in, and then providing grant funds for businesses to support converting both state and federal fishing gear to be compliant with new regulations. And lastly, in terms of thinking of the future of the fishing industry, I thought we should have state grants to help train the next generation of harvesters. For a long time, I've advocated in DC for the Young Fishermen's Development Act, and that does provide training at the federal level. But I think if there's ways to get state funds matched, that will help bolster those programs that a lot of different fishing groups have had access to. And that incentives for Mass food manufacturers and processors to buy Mass seafood and other proteins, I think is valuable. I think COVID really demonstrated how important it is for Massachusetts to strengthen our local food and supply chain. And so if we can incentivize ways for food manufacturers and processors to purchase that, I think that will help support local fishermen here and also decrease the carbon footprint. So I don't know, in order to do that, if the state should offer a tax credit or some other incentive, but those were just some ideas that I had in my presentation. Sorry, that's a lot.
All right, those are awesome ideas. Thank you.
So that's what thinking about this actually sounds like, as opposed to what I said. That's really the thoughtful way of doing it. Thank you, Aubrey. That was outstanding.
Aubrey, one is, could you send that list to us?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm also wondering, there are a lot of ideas that, yes, are specific to economic development, and maybe we want to be pulling into the report. So let's just maybe keep thinking about that. Thank you.
And I'm
Jackie,
really sorry not to be there in person, so I apologize for that.
No, everything's okay at home.
Yeah.
I
thank
guess just the big question is gonna be, how do you eat that elephant in the sense of or how do you present it? Do you do it by community? Do you do it by fishery? Do you do it how do you present that? So, my thought immediately just coming from groundfish was we could flush out an outline and gather all the data specific to groundfish, but maybe that wouldn't be necessarily the best for a portfolio of seafood overall in the Commonwealth. So I need to spend a little bit more time thinking about it. And I feel you, Gordon, because and how many vessels landed groundfish last year? I think some of these databases you go to would be really easy, and it's really just basic information. It's really hard to find. We have to go to our members and add up to look at. It's unbelievable.
So one hypothesis we have, bear with us, is whoever we are, Pat and Abby, is that one of the challenges of fishing in Massachusetts has been somewhat factionalized and kind of separate, right? Got North Shore, South Shore, we've got different species, different like. And I think part of the value of this commission is to come together and collectively, powerfully make your case to a lot of different places for more investment and more attention. And so I'm hoping, it may still, maybe you may do kind of by multiple ways, ports, fishery types overall, I'm not sure. I think that a small group, like a focus group, can talk that through, but to really collectively make your case.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I think this is extremely important, and I think raising the awareness in the state of the importance of the industry is the economic opportunities as well as contribution is hugely important. Just have to think through how to organize it, where data sets to go to.
One last,
And then I want to get Ed in too.
yeah, go ahead, before you forget.
Lose my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say was, I think one of the biggest challenges is how quickly the industry changes these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, something from 2 years ago might not even be relevant today. Something from 6 months ago might not be relevant today. So, that's the challenge.
Could we get a show of hands about who would be interested in participating in some sort of focus group to put this together? And we can also send out something offline for those that aren't present. I see Aubrey's hand up. Is that wishful thinking? No, it is.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm already on the focus group, but
Great.
you can be on both of them.
So Angela's hand.
Who else is that?
Oh, Angela had a hand. Great. So far, we have Jackie, Aubrey, Angela. I'm gonna assume Gordon because this was part of your idea. And right, and then I think Beth, who just got veto. Great.
What's our maximum we can have on a
Oh,
vote?
Member,
The committee members, yeah.
how many
total
members?
One, oh,
We'll count.
13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Let's
9,
count Dan.
17.
So it would be, 8.
Okay, we're fine.
We're good. Okay, and I think Beth was interested.
And the whole commission will see her drafts and.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right, that's awesome.
Just a comment, so we got a seafood marketing appropriation from Senator Tar about 12 years ago, maybe? $250,000 put aside to do seafood marketing, and that's how we're paying for the port profile project. It's not money that's tied to this group, but to the seafood marketing program. Well, that number hasn't changed, you know, so that might be a place to, you know, an easy ask, you know, but I'll get to another issue in a minute. That could be an easy ask to dial that up if you think that the work that we can do through that seafood marketing to do those kinds of investigations, to contract out to try to figure out how many seafood jobs we have, something like that.
Dan, what's that called? What's that grant called?
Well, the seafood marketing program gets an earmark in our state budget of $250,000. And it was a funded earmark by Senator Tar. And I think it actually allows us to divert commercial permit fees over into that fund. So, you know, it's all good. You know, we embrace that. That's how Wendy Minority is paid. But I see Tom's just arrived, and there's also some pretty challenging fiscal realities. So I just want to, so we can squeeze money out of that seafood marketing fund. We have it, right? But you know, there's some dark times coming in state budgeting, you know, over the next year or two. So, but this is for the long term. I mean, let's not worry about the deadlines, because it's all good if we have the vision of where we want to go. I just want us to not get totally frustrated if we don't get it in the next fiscal budget, which could be tough.
Okay, well, that's really helpful. Oh, Aubrey, do you have a hand to say something else?
Yeah, I'll say it really quick. I just didn't realize the commissioner was there. So I just wanted to say thank you. I know you were at the Cape earlier today, and the fishermen on the Cape really appreciated you highlighting the importance of the fishing industry to the public. So I just want to say thank you, given Jackie's point too. You know, it's really important to elevate the fishing industry. I just want to say thank you for your partnerships and value of our program. So just thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Aubrey.
Awesome. Okay, ready? Okay, so we've asked some folks from Maine. Do we have those on this? Okay, hopefully. Okay, that's great. You let me know you had a phone call. You permission to use slow. Okay, so someone asked, why did you invite Maine in to have a conversation with the Mass Working Group about ports and the like? So the reason and intent is that our understanding is that a few years ago, probably because of that superstorm, there was a lot of devastation on the Maine coast, as I think many of you know. And there was then a lot of statewide effort all the way to the legislature, and that came with money to really focus in on what to do about waterfronts in Maine and really shore them up for resilience and for. So I don't know whether that story is relevant or not to Massachusetts, but we thought it would be very valuable to have Maine come to us and share that experience, and we can draw what lessons we can or can't from that experience. So it's not to, put aside all the good work that Seaport Council does or the work on the port study that we're doing with Story or other things. It's just really like, is there something from Maine we can learn that would be useful for us to actually increase the resources for things you care about? So that's the purpose. So we've invited folks to come in and talk. We've got Melissa Britch from the Marine Maine Coastal Program. And then we've got Monique Combs from the Working Waterfront Efforts to really kind of give both a kind of community and a state perspective about this, and then ask all the questions that we want of Maine to learn. So with that, and then let's see, I think we're going to start with Melissa. And Melissa, do you want to introduce yourself? And then I think if you have slides, you can just share them automatically on screen.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. So let me try and share my screen. As you just said, I'm Melissa Britch. I work at Maine Coastal Program, which is essentially the main version of the Massachusetts Office for Coastal Zone Management. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right, so I'm going to just give a bit of context about Maine's working waterfronts and a few of the areas where I think we might be different than Massachusetts. Then I will talk about some of our state efforts to support working waterfronts, and then close with a few thoughts from a state agency perspective about what I think maybe you might be able to replicate in state government, and then just some things that Maine's doing well and areas where we also still have a lot of work to do. Come on. Next. Okay. So Maine has a lot of coastline, and we do have a lot of working waterfronts, maybe not as many as we'd wish, but still a fair amount relative to some other states. We have lost a lot in recent years, though, and what we have left is facing a lot of threats from both economic and demographic challenges and climate-related challenges. Our working waterfronts are really diverse, so we have everything from very, very small properties or access paths, sea and tidal, up to very large properties that may serve 100 boats at a time. There's also a pretty wide diversity in the amenities that's available at those sites. And we also have different types of ownership, so some of our sites are publicly owned, like boat launches or piers, and we also have a lot of private businesses or family or co-op owned properties that span that whole range of size and amenities. We have, come on. We only really have 3 big ports, which are Portland, Searsport, and Eastport, kind of southern, middle, and eastern part of our coast. You do see shipping and oil and some heavier industry there. And there is some degree of state management and engagement with those 3 areas. But basically everywhere else, we have a lot of commercial activity, but the management is pretty much all local. We don't have a lot of designated port areas like you do in Massachusetts. We are a home rule state, so we do have a lot of variance in what you see in terms of local regulation and how much support there is or is not for commercial activity in our many other harbors around the coast. So one just caveat I want to make before I talk any more about our efforts to support working waterfronts is that one really important distinction in all of our conversations is related to who owns the working waterfronts. So if it's a publicly owned like municipal or state property versus a privately owned property, that really affects what funding or tools might be available to you. And we do have some tools for private properties, which I'll talk about, but we don't have nearly as much as we need. So that's a big gap that we're trying to fill. Our fishing and aquaculture industries rely on both public and private properties, but the public properties alone cannot meet all of the demand. So the private infrastructure is really critical. However, a side problem that we're dealing with is that we don't actually know where all of our private working waterfronts are, because so many of them are really small and maybe family-owned properties that don't have landings or fuel or anything else. They don't really get captured in any kind of data collection method that we currently have. And so it makes it a little hard for us to categorize what we have and what we've lost, and it makes it tricky to plan since we don't always fully understand the vulnerabilities these properties are facing. We are making some headway on that front, so I'll mention that briefly later, and I think Monique is also going to talk a bit more about that. And the only other caveat I'll mention is that it's very, very hard for public agencies to give money to private working waterfronts. I think it's impossible with federal money, and it's possible but very challenging with state money to figure out how to do that well. And so we are having a lot of conversations about how does the state show up and help in this place, and what is our role to be useful and help out in the best way. So, okay. So I'll talk just really briefly about some options that we have to support working waterfronts. We'll start with grants. Mention a protection option for permanently protecting working waterfronts, and then just highlight a few other state and non-state efforts. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I will just say that the state has about 6 to 7 ongoing grant programs for state public boating facilities. Commercial users can benefit if you're improving a public site that commercial users are using, but these funds are for public facilities. And some of them are a little more oriented towards helping commercial users than others. But we have 6 to 7 that happen every year. They're spread across 3 state agencies, so it's a lot to keep track of. But if you have questions, I can tell you more about those. And they have funding for planning, design, and construction, but we definitely don't have as much construction money as we would like or probably could use. I'm going to highlight 2 grants, one that just happened and one that is happening starting next month, that are focused pretty specifically on working waterfronts. And so the first was the Working Waterfront Resilience Grant. And that was the money, I think Aubrey may have just mentioned it, but it was money that the state legislature set aside after the big storms in late 2023 and 2024. So that money was set aside by the legislature, it's state dollars, for rebuilding and improving resilience of properties that were damaged. That money we got out the door later in the year in 2024, and those projects are starting to wrap up. On the whole, I think the program went pretty well. There were a few challenges. One was that it had a 1-to-1 match requirement. So for many of the applicants, the amount of match they could provide limited how much funding they could request. There was also a requirement that there had to be 10 fishing or aquaculture users to be eligible for the funding. So a lot of our smaller properties could not access this funding. That was a gap. So on the whole, I think the program was pretty successful, and it was really unique in that it gave money to private properties as well as public ones, but there's no plan to repeat that funding. That was really a one-time thing, at least that's how it stands right now. I also wanted to mention the Maine Infrastructure Adaptation Fund, which is what it sounds like. It's a fund the state created a few years ago to help adapt infrastructure to climate challenges. The fund most recently got some money from a federal climate resilience grant that went to the state, and they actually set aside a portion of that money for resilience projects at public working waterfront facilities. So those are mixed-use facilities that are either municipal or tribally owned that also conserve and show benefit to the commercial fishing industry by making improvements and climate improvements to these properties. So that grant is actually opening in January, so we'll have a lot more to share about it in the future. But it is funding for both design and construction, which is really key, and the match requirements are much lower. So that's, I think, pretty exciting for a lot of people. So now I'll shift gear and speak a little bit about some permanent protection options that we have here in Maine, one in particular. And one of the big challenges that we're facing is that we have so many working waterfront properties that are privately owned. Often they're family owned, and they may not really be that industrial. So there's a ton of real estate demand on our coast for coastal property. And so when these properties that are in working use go up for sale, they're typically purchased and then very rapidly turned over to non-commercial use. So we're just kind of constantly losing working waterfront access to that sale process. And it's pretty tricky to intervene. But we have one tool, we call it the Working Waterfront Access Protection Program, or the WAP, and it uses covenants to protect working waterfronts. And program's been around since the early 2000s, and both public and private properties are eligible for this funding. And it's a collaboration between our Marine Resources Agency and Land for Maine's Future, which is our state agency that funds the conservation of working and recreational lands. And so covenants are different from easements, which you may have heard about in the context of land protection. So an easement gives somebody or a group of people a legal right to use someone else's property, and a covenant is a legal agreement that restricts the use of a property regardless of who owns it. So you can do a lot of different things with covenants, but Maine's program is designed specifically to permanently protect working waterfronts by restricting future development. So we refer to it as selling the development rights on the property. You can still make changes to the property, but all future development has to be compatible with fishing or aquaculture uses. And these covenants run with the land, so they stay in place regardless of who owns the property. And the state gets a right of first refusal, so we can be at the table for future sales and ensure that the next owner will also honor the covenant. People get paid for putting the covenant on their property. That's definitely a motivating factor for participating. And the payment is established by an appraisal. I'm skipping over a lot of nuance here, but it typically works out to about 25 to 30% of the property value. So if you had a coastal property that's worth $1 million and you put these restrictions on it, you could probably get around $250,000 to $300,000. And because when you sell the property in the future, you have to do another appraisal. And since you're restricting the development, that often lowers the sale price of the property below what its fair market value would be. And so these properties are protected and they're more affordable for future buyers. And since this isn't a grant, the owners have a lot more flexibility in how they spend the money that we're giving them. So that I think can be a big perk for participants in this program. So the WAP is, we're very lucky. It's kind of a unique program. It's been around for over 20 years now. We've protected 31 properties of all different sizes and types all across our coast. It's funded either through state bonds or the state budget, and the next round is opening in January. So it's a good month for us. And the WAP has been our primary working waterfront protection tool, and it's very durable and very strong, but it can't meet everyone's needs. It is a big ask to put these permanent restrictions on the development of a property. And also, since there's so much real estate demand for coastal property, you can have a really big payday if you're selling your property in the open market. So property owners do have a lot of different incentives to weigh when they consider doing this program. So it's not a perfect tool for every situation, and we definitely need other tools that aren't as strict as this covenant program. And basically, anything that can slow a sale and buy time for people to figure out how to support these working waterfront properties and their businesses is really, really helpful. And there are people in Maine that are looking into options to use maybe a different covenant, but in a similar way. But figuring out how to pay for that is also a big challenge. I think this is a program that definitely could be replicated by another state agency or in partnership with the Land Protection Agency of some form. And I know there's a county in Long Island, New York that actually did replicate this program. So I know it can be repeated if you're interested. And just to briefly highlight a few other state efforts, Aubrey already mentioned this, but we just created a state working waterfront advisory council in the last legislative session. It's a permanent council to track, report on, and advise the legislature about working waterfront issues and solutions. We are currently trying to figure out who is actually on it, so it's still very, very new, but there will be 15 members with a diverse suite of expertise coming from different parts of Maine. One of the first things that this group is going to focus on is trying to find some answers to addressing barriers to financial viability in working waterfronts. So that's things like the lack of flood insurance and also these funding gaps, especially to private working waterfront properties. And one of the big goals of this was to just give our legislature kind of a regular reminder of working waterfront issues and hopefully give some heft to any possible solutions that come out of the council. And it's still very new, but we're hoping it'll help think about the role of state government in this space. And I'm sure we'll have a lot more to report in a year or so. And Aubrey mentioned that technical assistance fund for working waterfronts. I think the council is hoping to help us figure out how to spend that fund. We don't really have a lot of money in it yet, but it is a pretty exciting opportunity. Also just mentioned Maine Coastal Program was able to find some funding in our budget to do working waterfront inventories and help address some of those gaps where we don't know what we even have or where it is. It's a huge task given how big our coast is. And so we're trying to break it into more manageable chunks, and we do need a lot of partners to do that. And we're working with Monique at Maine Coast Fishermen's Association for that project. So I'll let her speak a little more about that. And outside of state government, I think as a whole, we've built a lot of just collective momentum, and things are just really starting to happen after several years of work. So there's interest from other groups in also doing inventories. Groups are exploring other ways to protect working waterfronts and get creative. And as a whole, we're just bringing a lot of awareness to working waterfront issues. and that they connect with a lot of other issues like housing or workforce development. So just making sure that working waterfronts show up in those conversations. We definitely have a lot of work still to do to support businesses and adapt infrastructure, but it's pretty exciting right now. And just last slide, thinking about things state agencies can replicate. Planning grants and definitely can go a long ways, even if you're not giving money to private entities. If you're improving public facilities, that can in some ways benefit the commercial industry. Anything to make engineering and permitting simpler for communities or other users, I think, can go a long ways. And we're trying to figure out ways to make that some technical assistance in that space a little easier to access for everyone. Then finding more construction funding, and then programs like the Working Waterfront Access Protection Program can definitely be replicated as well. So I'll stop there and take any questions, and thank you for your time.
All right, we're gonna hear from Anika in a second too. So any initial questions for this program? Some interesting tools around grants, around kind of protections, kind of easements of a certain meter.
I actually found it very intriguing, and the focus group that's talking about the industry globally. The port infrastructures are, once they go, they're gone forever. She's talking about that. Vessels, we keep shrinking and then we expand, shrink and expand, but you can bring vessels into a port that has a port infrastructure, a full hub. I can only speak for one port, but most of the ports I know are mostly municipal owned properties, so they're more eligible for a lot of funding, especially in Massachusetts. We have seaport bond money. So when municipalities have a project that needs a major renovation, they've got a fund potentially that they're eligible to dip into. Private properties have nothing, except as a designated port area restriction. That's what they have. So the energy is always, and I'm usually on those harbor plan committees for Gloucester, pushing people. We're in an industrial park. We've got to stay as one. But locally, a mayor and a government can show easily, you got your whole infrastructure in decline. Let's ask to be removed from the designated port area. Now, DEP doesn't have to, or the legislature doesn't have to coalesce to that. But when stuff's falling in the water and there's nobody doing business at that time, it will be back. Those things come back. But that's the danger. And so far, economic development, everything that we've looked at, nobody really qualifies for something that would be any more helpful than traditional banking. And traditional banking, they're not blind. They see where is the business that's going to be done. But you can't let the walls fall. Can't let the walls fall into disrepair. That last slide that was just presented showed key items that would be helpful: engineering and planning and permitting funding, availability, then construction phase. Those can be revolving loans, low interest, long term, those types of things. I think we need to be creative. If we're not worried about port infrastructure, then there's no issue. But I know that that's a critical part of this that falls by the wayside all the time. Anyway.
Yeah, I was thinking the same as Vito. If we had a revolving loan program whereby the state could, one, purchase properties or ports that are going up for sale and then hold them until there's a buyer, and then give a loan out, low interest, so forth, the person has to pay back. Then it's like a bridge loan, essentially, and it holds it so that it doesn't go out of use. And we just need to set up that kind of fund that allows those kind of revolving loans. That gives the time and the financing that a regular bank loan might not give, right? Mm-hmm. And it supports the industry so that it has time to adapt and buy it and or invest in it. I was curious with Melissa in Maine, who buys, so with the WAP program, right? I guess who's buying it from the state after the state, right? State has right of first refusal. They buy these areas that were in private hands and then who buys it then? Unless I'm not understanding it. But like.
Yeah, maybe could have explained that a little better. So the state is not buying these properties. We hold the development rights, so that's what ensures that like you cannot like build condos on the property, for example. But when like a current owner goes to sell, we're not going to buy it from them. We'll help facilitate, make sure they can find a buyer. I don't believe we've had any issues where someone has had one of these protected properties and has not been able to find another buyer. So we're really just, the right of first refusal is just to make sure that the next buyer actually will keep the property working and will honor the covenant.
Rights. You're just buying the development rights.
But essentially, it's an interesting idea because Mass has a conservation restriction, which
Yeah.
is different, but
CR.
it's kind of a CR.
Like a CR.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, Melissa, who pays the money to buy the development rights? Is that state money that buys those or?
Yeah, so that's the Land for Mains Future. So that's a state agency, it's state money.
Just wanna give you a follow-up. State of Mass has the protections built into the designated port areas. You have to do it ad hoc in Maine right now because you must not have that legislated that there are designated port areas, right? So we have designated protected areas. They're still privately owned, but there's no access to funding. And the reason those protections are there, it would be great for a body like this, or let's find out who are the right people to talk to that continues to want the DPA, and I'm one of them, all right? Is to have an audience to say, well, the reason in other words, we've already got the protections built on these properties that are there, but there's no compensation for that. They're compensating. I don't think people are looking for compensation. They're saying, if what we're holding for the public in perpetuity is worth something to the Commonwealth, why isn't there a funding source, not free, but a place for a revolving loan that recognizes the value of that property? The property owner's on the hook, property owner has the mortgage, but the income is gonna come, you gotta build it and they will come. If they're not built, nobody's coming. So the catch-22 has gotta be broken. The Commonwealth has the restriction. Commonwealth's not putting any money up to make it cut.
So Fatia, and then maybe we're gonna go to Manif, just to get that out.
Okay, so years ago, there used to be Fisherman's Loan Fund, and Vito will remember this, when the boats were not being built, and they made all these boats, and there was too many, and you couldn't even get loans, and banks weren't giving out to the bankers. They did a Fisherman's Loan Fund, where it was revolving money for fishing vessels. You needed to repair your boat, you needed a winch, whatever you need, you couldn't get it, but this would give you, you'd have to pay back. There was an organization set up, and everything was okay. It dissolved, we don't know how it dissolved, why it went, whatever, there's always politics involved. Then we try to approach the WAF owners themselves, because 90% of the WAFs in Gloucester are owned by private properties. Try to go with Senator Bruce Tarr and Representative Amon. We try to go in front and say we needed the same exact thing for WAFs. There was a WAF that was all organized. They were all gonna put in their own money a little bit to start the base and then start that to actually borrow money. They were looking at the budget for $3 million. It was put in the line item when it was devolved, and then it disappeared and never came forward. Then they kept saying when Baker was there, we were going back and forth with all of his workers and said that, oh no, it's private entity, we can't do it, it's private entity, but you put a DPA. When you put DPA, that means you are restricting what we actually can do. So it's not private entity because you still have the easements and all of that. We were supposed to do it again, and unfortunately, it was just put at rest. That's what you need to look at for these WAFs. If you're gonna keep it in the DPA, you need to get the loan fund. You can do it. The WAFs wanna do it, but if we don't do it quickly, they're just gonna say, like a couple of them, they're sold and they don't care. The people who bought them are waiting for them to take it out of DPA and waiting for them to torture and pass away so they can do what they want. And a lot of them right now, because there's no more environmental, anyone looking at these, they're all turned into marinas anyways. And the people who want to extend their WAFs and do their WAFs and actually repair them can't get Brownsfield money, can't get any money. No one's backing them up. You try to get them with Mass Law. What is it? Don't have to state fish fair with you people, Massachusetts Development, whatever it's called. Ask them to go help them because they're supposed to find them loans when you can't. Have not helped any of these poor people. I've been going with them. I've been doing it, and it's been part on our team. Every time we get these calls, we can't get loans, we can't get this, we can't get fixed, it goes with DFS, and then we have Story go and I go down, let the state fish bureau look at it, what are we gonna do? So we need to really come up with something, even after this, just among ourselves, to come up with something that we can bring back to them and say, let's work on it.
Great.
Because we're getting blamed for it, but we all wanna help.
But we clearly identified a gap we've got to figure out how to fill, and this has come up a number of places, so I think for sure we got to figure out how to deal with
Did I
it.
do that fast enough?
So that was good. I've got Aubrey, Ed, and we'll go on to the next presentation. So Aubrey's, I think, had her hand up and Ed. Aubrey?
I'm gonna hold off because I bet Monique will cover it, so I'll stop.
Okay, Ed, last one on this one.
You know, the value of shoreside real estate has become so, so high that, you know, I don't know how we could bureaucratically keep up with it, keep up with those changes, because they're happening like, for instance, in Green Harbor, Blackstone owns Safe Harbor and Green Harbor. They pulled out all their pilings, they're doing their own dredging. They're telling people they're gonna have to pay at least for 32 feet, and it's probably gonna be over $300 a foot. And that does include some commercial vessels that are there. So that's the kind of economic pressure that's on these places right now. I know Baxter's in Hyannis, the town's somewhat trying to come up with some money, maybe through Seaport but then they're gonna have to still get, funds from the town, and of course, you know, Barnstable has its own money crunch. I'm curious about chapter 91 permits, rather. I'm curious as to, because I think somewhere along the lines, there must be, I think there would be some information that could be brought forward to this commission that would be helpful in defending some of this stuff from that type of development. Because most of these chapter 91 permits, you know, if you had the ability to look them up, there might be restrictions that could save from development, but I think those get lost in the shuffle once someone's waving a ton of money around. So
it helped me understand more, because we can connect with DEP and ask them to come speak to us, but what specifically would it be most helpful to hear about? The process or the rules?
the process, the rules, the ability to go back and review.
To look up, to review
they,
for compliance,
yeah,
things like
I mean,
that? Okay.
I see marinas and I'm saying, small marinas become big marinas. Okay, is that still included in your original chapter 91 permit? I'm not sure.
Okay.
You know, and in the meantime, that gets 10 years down the road and the next buyer comes in and he does something. But, you know, and that's what's happening.
Mhm.
It's happening, you know, again, what, Safe Harbor now owns how many marinas in the state? Probably around 10, I think.
So,
And I'm not picking on them. I mean, they're whatever.
no, I
but
think that would be good to,
yeah,
if that's information that would be helpful to
it's
this
just,
group, let's
to
get them,
me,
yeah.
it's amazing the amount of money that's in boating these days.
And-
When you go into a marina 10 years ago, you know, you'd see, I mean, now you see these 40-foot boats that are probably $3 million boats. You're seeing 50-foot boats that you wouldn't even imagine would have fit into that marina, that are probably going for, that's probably $8 million. And all these places have waiting lists. Every place has a waiting list. And so trying to shoehorn in commercial fishing under that economic pressure is almost impossible these days. It's almost impossible to find a place to tie a boat up right now. In Plymouth, we have, we're competing with a American Cruise Line. They rebuilt a commercial pier and the town of Plymouth now allows that cruise line to come in 38 times a day, 38 times a year. So that's the level of economic pressure that exists in the state of Massachusetts right now. And it's killing the fishing industry.
So, I mean,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, it seems like we've identified a number of potential tools. Like one is for non-DPA areas where actually small private folks could, this kind of CR for those is kind of an interesting idea. We should look at it, I think. I think, Ed, you're saying maybe chapter 91 is a way to dampen down some of this economic pressure on those places where they're really going beyond their license and we're just not having enough time to monitor, comply, or the like. And then I think we're also talking about, to Vito's point, how do we money into the DPAs to the private side, which often kind of languish. I mean, as someone pointed out, people buy it up and are frankly land banking until it gets out so they can sell it for content, which not what anyone wants. So I think we've got a number of tools we got to play with here for a real problem. I think we've identified now kind of the docking fees and stuff for these really expensive places where fishing is getting crowded out. That's probably another conversation. Maybe when we get to the port study, we have to look at and figure out what are some solutions there.
And just a minor thing to his point, chapter 91 does now have a new online lookup tool. They've been working to try to get all their historic licenses into a map, so you can, anyone who wants to can go check on the license. So Abby, I'll get you that link and we can maybe send that out to the group.
And I don't know whether the chapter 91 permit actually says you can have no more than 15 slips or whatever, or it's not that specific. I don't know.
I think it very much depends on the specifics of the license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to talk about chapter 91 and DEP. There is a process to which if you have a problem with a town over a mooring or a tie-up, there used to be you could appeal to the DEP to file an appeal and it would be heard. Well, I filed one of them once and 20 years later, I haven't heard yet.
But you're still waiting.
I am.
Yeah.
Because it's a mooring issue and again, in these small ports, moorings are probably the most valuable asset you have.
So again, we're looking at starting to give a list of these things that we've got to dive into. Some will be able to say something. I mean, he's got kind of a really good community perspective. So thanks for joining us. It's really good to see you.
And thanks to Melissa.
Are you guys ready for me then? Sorry, you froze for a second.
We're ready.
Okay.
We're ready.
I'm gonna share my slides, but I also, thank you for acknowledging differences obviously between Maine and Massachusetts. A lot of my work is like hyper local as well, but hopefully there's some stuff that I talk about that can be a little bit useful. I also just wanted to acknowledge too, based on what Ed said too, there's 2 safe harbors, I believe, in Maine now. And we're having the same issues when it comes to moorings and spaces available for fishing vessels, even at marinas and boatyards. And we're hoping when we get into some of our inventory work that we'll be able to look at not just access, but infrastructure necessary for commercial fishing. Sorry, apparently I can't do a slideshow and talk at the same time. Okay.
That'll work.
That work?
We're beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Monique Coombs. I'm the Director of Community Programs for the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association. Our mission is to restore the fisheries in the Gulf of Maine and sustain Maine's fishing communities for future generations. And my job definitely takes up the latter half of that. I run our Fisherman Wellness Program and I run our Working Waterfront Program. I live in or on Orr's Island, which is a part of Harpswell, in a fishing community, and I'm part of a fishing family. And I just wanted to bring that up because you'll notice potentially that a lot of my examples are in Harpswell. And it's just because I live there. So it's one of the lowest hanging fruits for some of our work, although we do work all along the coast. What kind of kicked off a lot of our Working Waterfront work was this report that I did back in 2020. So I'm just going to give a little bit of context here. And we called it the State of Maine's Working Waterfront. And basically what I did was just go into about a dozen communities. And we break up Maine into Southern Maine, Mid-Coast Maine, and Down East Maine. So I went to communities in each of those 3 different regions and talked with fishermen and wharf owners to just sort of get a snapshot of what was going on with the Working Waterfront in their communities. This is available online, and I can share links to some of the stuff I talk about with Abby and Pat so she can share with all of you afterwards. One of the things that was most interesting, I think, that came out of this report is this idea that, we all intuitively know we have different kinds of working waterfronts in Maine, but really trying to distinguish the different types, because every coastal community or every fishing community in Maine has the same challenges, but we have different infrastructure and potentially different ways of going about trying to solve those challenges. Same goes for some of the stuff like what Melissa brought up. We have some funding programs at the state that are available to some types of working waterfronts, but not all of them. Specifically, this type of working waterfront, which we call the discrete working waterfront, which are the properties that are most often used for gear storage and maintenance. They're usually the oldest properties in the community. They're super vulnerable to like storm surges and sea level rise because they're often in some disrepair. I think I have a couple of pictures. So like these types of properties, there's often no landings. Nobody's landing lobster or fish or anything at these properties. They might not have bait. They don't have fuel. So when it comes to access to funding or access, honestly, even to loans and any type of capital, it's really hard because there's no economics associated with them. That being said, they're pretty critical to coastal communities. They're culturally valuable. They're spaces where fishermen are able to convene, and they keep a lot of pressure off some of the larger wharfs that exist in Maine. If all of these were to collapse and we relied on just the bigger wharfs that had all of the amenities, there would be a lot, potentially a lot more tension on the water. So this definitely helps space out businesses, as well as, I think really puts a stake in the ground that when you're in a community, it's a fishing community, because you can see these types of properties along the coast of Maine. Let's see. So within the State of Maine's Working Waterfront Report and some of the other work that MCFA has done, we were told that education and outreach was super important to municipalities. And Aubrey kind of brought this up when she was talking about the new Working Waterfront Commission that Maine is going to be doing, and the educational materials that Riley was talking about. Back, it was almost 20 years ago, Maine Sea Grant did a couple of guides for working waterfront communities. They did one in Harpswell, and they did one in the Moosabec area. And basically what the guide said was, welcome to a working waterfront community. Here's what you can expect to sort of see, smell, hear, and things like that. There were a lot of discussions over the past few years about recreating those guides. And we chose, obviously, to update the one that was in Harpswell and put a little bit of a different spin on it. This is available on the website as well. I apologize. I probably should have included a couple of photos of what was on the inside. But basically what we have in this guide is, here's what you can expect if you move to a working waterfront community. But we also tried to include things like a couple of recipes for lobster stock. And we had some information about different ordinances within the community about ocean health that were important to the fishing community, which things like, Harpswell, for example, has a no pesticides within 20 feet ordinance. I also want to bring up too that one of the things that's potentially different about Maine and Massachusetts that's notable is, while we're both home rule states, Maine does not operate under Dillon's rule. So our municipalities have a little bit more power to enact ordinances and zoning that are specific to our municipality and what we want to be prioritizing and protecting. So we've done this guide in Harpswell. We've done it in Brunswick, Maine. We're working with St. George and Phippsburg to create guides. And there was a group in Goldsboro that created their own guide. And our hope is that more coastal communities that have active fishing industry will create these guides, because we've also had a lot of tension in our coastal communities, especially post-pandemic. I'm sure it's the same for you guys as well. We have a lot more people moving into our communities that aren't familiar with living by the water. They're not familiar with commercial fishing. They make a boat ton more money than a lot of the locals and longtime residents. And the hope with these guys is to potentially mitigate future conflict. What's next? So in Harpswell, again, this goes back to the home rule. As part of creating this guide, we also created a right to fish policy. This exists for farms, the right to farm ordinances. This is not binding, but basically what we asked Harpswell was, we need to be better about notifying new residents about commercial fishing. We need to keep education and outreach updated for commercial fishing. We want to reiterate that commercial fishing is exempt from criminal nuisance laws in the state of Maine. And again, we hope to be able to do this with a lot more communities in the future. But I just wanted to note that. So as was noted, in January 2024, we had some massive storms that destroyed a lot of the working waterfront, specifically those discrete working waterfronts that we talked about. The state did provide funding, and Melissa talked about that a little bit. Organizations like the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association and Island Institute also did fundraising and pooled some funds. I can't remember the Island Institute statistics specifically, but MCFA was able to provide $5,000 grants, no strings attached, to working waterfront properties along the coast. A lot of them were these discrete working waterfronts that, just needed a little help buying the materials to get some repairs. And again, those types of properties that weren't able to access other types of funding. I also just want to note, we learned a lot of lessons after these storms, including information about flood zone insurance, which could be its entirely own panel or webinar. But some of the properties in Maine that did have flood zone insurance, when they put in their, what's the word I'm looking for? Their request. They put it in their claims. They were denied and then dropped by their companies. And we were then informed that flood zone insurance does not cover anything over the water, like a wharf. And then we also found out that if you get federal funding for properties like this, usually insurance is required. So having state programs, municipal programs, or private programs that can support the working waterfront is super important, as well as like education and outreach for people, including the feds, to be able to better understand the needs of commercial fishing and working waterfront in our communities. So to the inventory work. So a few years ago, MCFA also created a working waterfront inventory template specifically for municipalities. As Melissa said, we don't really know exactly what we have along the coast. And one of the things MCFA pitched was to provide capacity and power to our municipalities to inventory their own working waterfronts. Because again, Southern Maine, Southern Maine, Mid-Coast Maine, and Down East Maine all have different priorities and different types of working waterfronts. And we thought the best way for municipalities to understand that was to do some of the work themselves. Especially, we have a lot of clam harvesters and intertidal access, and things like right-of-ways and walk-in access and parking are tough to do at a really high level, but a little bit easier for municipalities. So again, I can share the link with Pat and Abby, and you can take a look at this. A lot of the data that we use for the templates in municipalities is available online, and it's just a matter of people collecting it. And it is a great way for communities to identify ways to preserve and protect their working waterfront. And as Melissa said, we're also, this is just a pretty picture, working with the state now to create a methodology for inventorying the working waterfront sort of at large on the coast. One of the things that we've been doing is creating a matrix that identifies the different types of working waterfronts. So we're loosely calling them now things like a major commercial wharf or an operational wharf, a discrete wharf, or a residential wharf, public landings and town landings, and the type of commercial fishing activity that sort of exists on those. We're doing this or I think it's important for multiple reasons. Is one, the economics of commercial fishing are obviously critically important to coastal communities, but as are the cultural significance. And I think it was Ed that was talking about, a lot of our coastal communities are getting incredibly gentrified because of new residents, increasing in population, and these types of things. And we really want to identify ways to protect and preserve the working waterfront. And I'm incredibly thankful to our state for allowing us this opportunity to look more critically at the types of working waterfronts that we have so we can create solutions for each of those types of properties instead of like a one size fits all approach. So I think that's about it. I'll stop sharing. So again, like I'm not sure all of those solutions fit well for Mass, but I love the idea of being able to learn from each other to better protect the working waterfront, because I do think we have some similar challenges in commercial fishing in Maine and Massachusetts, as well as on our working waterfronts. So
Great.
thanks
Thank
for
you so much.
letting me chat with you.
That's great. So questions from the group? Gordon.
Hey Monique, Gordon Carr with the port director here in New Bedford. And I apologize, I had to come in late. I had a phone call I had to do, but we've been tracking pretty carefully some legislation that Senator Collins, I think Senator King, and certainly Congresswoman Pingree have been doing on a working waterfronts initiative. And we've been talking about it every time we're down in DC. Because we think, I mean, there are a couple of different versions of that kind of working their way through Congress, but your folks in particular have been kind of spearheading it. And I'm just curious, is there some, at least, sub rosa tie-in to your working waterfronts work here in anticipation of something like that getting passed? So you're sort of well positioned if there is funding that comes along with it. And is that something that we might kind of follow as a model? Again, you never know when anything's going to get passed in Congress. But they filed it now in at least 2 straight Congresses. So, hope springs eternal. I just didn't know if how much of what they're trying to do aligns with what you're doing.
Yeah, the full disclosure, like honestly, I'm not sure how much aligns like perfectly. I do think that the work we're doing in Maine right now, especially with like inventorying and laying some of that groundwork, will help us if and when a working waterfront bill is passed, especially if there's funding attached to it. But otherwise, I mean, we're just operating, like that might not happen in the hopes that we can provide solutions regardless. And then if it does pass, hopefully we will be able to take some advantage because we've laid some groundwork.
Great. Thanks. Other questions? All right. So, I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of good stuff for us to have to digest, right, in the coming time. And we've got a whole bunch of potential tools here. I want to note kind of Ed's concern, I think the main two about, some mooring or docking fees, and that's a real problem in some cases. So I think we identified both problems and solutions. We need to map and start then kind of building out. It's really good. So maybe we should take a very short break. We want to maybe 5 minutes, want to come back and talk about the report this year, kind of get some ideas so we can start drafting that for you all. And then we'll probably wrap up after that. So we're going to 5 minute break.
Bye, Monique. Bye, Melissa. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my joint frog, yeah.
Just
Might be better than you know.
bring it.
Yeah. When you're.
Right, but none of us know. If people talk to them so much information, that's a good thing for the stakeholders and not. You still control and do it. Like, reading that as a. What about this? I just start this.
Oh, we did, yeah, started it. You said-
What?
And we've been doing it.
I don't know how this would be officially working.
Oh, this was Aubrey's gonna reach out to Monique. Everything.
Yeah.
I like it.
Hey, do you know if you can daisy chain extra speakers out of
You get daisy chain too. I don't think it's.
No,
Everybody, let's get started if we could. All right, so the final thing we wanted to do today is talk a little bit about, we've been kind of, when was our first meeting, Dan, was when?
April?
Was April of this year. So, I think we've kind of got ourselves settled, we've got some direction, we've had some good work groups, we're advancing some good product, we're exploring some ideas. We do owe a report to the legislature, there's not a due date on it, but, you know, probably January, February is the rough time frame. So, our thought is that we, and you all, you guys give direction, is that our next year's report needs to be a big ask with a lot of stuff in it, but we need some more time to build a number of those things out. And I think we're starting to get those on the table. But for this report, we're thinking something a little bit more modest, but we are thinking the offshore wind recommendations that are pretty much developed. The group of commission today said looks good. We probably want to put some general color about what the commission is and what it aspires to do. What else, you know, we can talk a little bit about the other groups we have going around the flounder processing, AIS and some other things. But what else do you want this report this year to include, to say, to cover? And then our job is to draft a draft for you, and then we'll, you know, chop it around until we get it right. But what is people's, what would people like in it? Okay.
Well, I think for, first year, you're trying to get ideas, you're trying to, figure out subject matter. I think we have to transition from, just kind of absorbing ideas to actually, spending time talking amongst our commission members on all these subjects. And I think there's a number of subjects, there's infrastructure, things like food security grants, shoreside support structure. You can include, all the things that are related to the industry that aren't necessarily part of the Massachusetts Fisheries Advisory Commission. But I see this as something that directs that conversation into rulemaking. And I think we need to be a little bit more focused on that.
Other thoughts? Good.
So I think it was Gordon who said this during one of our focus group meetings, but for me, objective 4 in our offshore wind is really important. The legislation that supports the offshore wind initiative in the Commonwealth really, me with Gordon said, identifies this concept of, coexistence between wind and fisheries. And I think, our group hopes to provide more definition around that. raise, whether it's looking at critical issues for the fishing industry or raising economic awareness within the state, or whether it's determining kind of our place in that. What is coexistence? I'm sure wind and the fishing industry really mean. I think we're still, I hope we're gonna be further identifying that and creating an action plan for that. Moving forward, that have a little bit more teeth. I think this year, we're still trying to understand how this body is working with other, to create efficiencies with other groups, and how would it interact with other groups, and what would it be. I think hopefully moving forward, we'll have a little bit more direction and recommendations, maybe that even could turn into, legislation.
And partly to your point, and to add, I mean, I think the fisheries working group can hear the kind of day-to-day presentations, month-to-month stuff, be a source of kind of information sharing. But here we can hopefully move into dialogue and recommendation action making from this commission. Okay, so
Yeah, I mean, just building on Jackie's point, one of my concerns, if, when, pick your term, offshore wind procurement comes back in Massachusetts, the pressures on those negotiations are gonna be even greater than they were last time, right? The developers are going to, I predict, really grind the gears on the Commonwealth that are coming to those procurements. And so it's gonna be more important that we have a body like this now to continue to raise those issues of fisheries into those conversations kind of throughout, because it's not gonna get any easier, I don't think, if it comes back around.
And I think to both those points, I think from bone down, it was go forth and coexist.
Yes.
And yet no one knew what the hell that meant, or if it was even possible, right? And so we are still trying to figure out what that could mean. And so a state strategy that is for, what's that?
Coming from the fishing industry, it's a little annoying.
Yeah.
It's like a declaration.
It's a little insulting.
You shall coexist.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't ever ask you whether you wanted them.
Yeah.
They just said, here's your new friend, here's your,
Right, exactly.
here's your new sister, get along.
Have a play date.
It's gonna be great.
You're gonna love
We
it.
all can get along as you get out of the way. There.
Yeah. We got a lot of research for you. Aubrey.
Thank you. Yeah, I really think there's been some great progress with each focus group. So I would hope in the report we could touch on some of those. I think the Port Profile project will really elevate the commercial fishing industry's value and highlight different ports, and also the needs, and help empower town officials and harbor masters to kind of advocate for what's needed in each town. So I think that those will be useful, as well as the processing for seafood marketing and offshore wind. So I hope at some point that all three of those will be included. And then I really like what Gordon had done with the ideas for economic development. So I hope that there can be some recommendations, but also like an action item, like what we think specific legislation could do to improve that. I agree with Jackie. I think we need to highlight some of the offshore wind, but I really want to make sure that this commission in our report is highlighting a lot of other great aspects that we can bolster the seafood industry, and make sure that the report doesn't feel offshore wind heavy focused, in my opinion.
Jackie's nodding right. And my take is I think I think by next year, we want very specific asks with like close to legislative language written potentially.
Yeah.
Right. And this year we're going to have to say, I think as Aubrey said, the focus groups, the offshore wind piece, here's some things we're exploring, and get ready. Because next year you're going to see something pretty robust, for lack of better terms. But we can see that with some of the ideas we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
So we would include some of the port stuff that we talked today, or no?
Yeah.
I think we include some ideas. I think my take is we're not quite ready, because we've got to wait for the port study. I think some of these ideas about whether or not like a CR for sort of non-deep
or revolving fund or whatever.
Right, we need to kind of, I think, dive in a little further. So when we give somebody the legislature, it feels like they can actually act on it quickly versus say, oh, nice, it's not detailed enough, therefore they ignore it. So that,
Yeah, and if it's budgetary, I think it's gonna be too late to affect the next fiscal budget, because the House, submits all of their amendments in February. So it seems like our report that you'll be drafting is gonna be almost like an action plan that says this commission is going to investigate this and compile recommendations on that.
Well,
And then we do that in the next year.
Yeah.
Like, we identify the topics that we've worked on over the last 8 months as our focus areas, and then specifics will come in the, in the next year.
The only thing I'd add to that, Dan, is the bond bill is probably gonna be voted on in the spring, because some of the bond bill could set up a revolving.
Well, it could, but this report's gonna come out in like 6 weeks. So we could instantly be working on
I
that.
got you.
But if there are one or two specifics, we wanna put the ask in now. We can do
The
that.
bond bill is there. I mean, I don't know what else I didn't want to say anything about that, but.
Sure, so I think you're talking about the Mass Ready Act,
Yeah, the Mass
right?
Ready Act,
So
Mass Ready Act.
going to the bond committee, I believe, next, and is expected to be moving through the legislature over the next 6 months or so. I think there are some elements in it we've talked about before in terms of the Port Sustainability Commission and some of the authorization that's in there that would support funding for DPA projects that are certainly there if anyone has additional thoughts or wants to share.
So it's just a timely piece, right, as the legislature
Yeah.
moves that through. I don't know.
Yeah, because so we do have a champion or two we can get help from within the legislature. So the question is, there's like on a few ideas, like some kind of the revolving loan fund that Aubrey mentioned for kind of gear and sort of small portrait stuff. It's bigger than micro, but but smaller than what a lot of banks probably going to do. If there's a few ideas that you want to work on, we just need to figure out how to craft those is all. And so, Aubrey, on that idea of the kind of what I'll call the macro micro fund, I mean, maybe we should talk with you to see if we can flesh that out a little bit more. If there's an idea from Maine, one of those things around some kind of revolving loan fund that would make sense, maybe those are things we should a few things we should try to do now, and then we'll have the bigger story a year from now. So,
yeah, and Pat, I don't know too enough. I've made it in the chat, but something we're investigating a lot at the Fishermen's Alliance right now is like the right to fish in each town, and some of them have them and some don't, and which ones are doing it well and how can they be models for others. So I don't know if there's things in legislation we could do about that, but that was another thing, just trying to define commercial fishing and also like the right to fish and have that access. So I don't know if those are things that are quick that can be added or not, but that we're actually.
And Aubrey, is the right to farms municipality by municipality, or is it actually a statewide thing?
I think it's town to town.
I think it's municipality.
It's municipality, okay.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, that's good,
And I'm a little confused about the right to fish because, like, for example, we might have a boat ramp that was paid for by Wallop Row funds, right? And we kind of look the other way on whether a commercial entity is using that. You know what I mean? But
it was specifically for sort of recreational, right?
Yeah, if it's a recreational funding source as opposed to a state funding source, it could get a little dicey. So I'm confused about what the right to fish is actually accomplishing.
Well, I think, I don't know if our main folks aren't anymore. I think I heard under state law in Maine, a right to fish exempts you from nuisance suits. I think that's what I heard.
That's right.
And I think the advantage of that is if someone doesn't like the smell of dead fish, too bad. It's kind of, because and farming has been the same issue, right? We look like whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can do maybe do an exploration of this to see what Maine did.
Maybe in the minutes of this meeting, we could pursue that.
Yes.
Right away.
And I think right to fish, right to farm, if there's a state overlay, as Aubrey's saying, I think there is maybe on the nuisance side, so
But there's also some nuisance behaviors on the water that I think some commercial fishermen might want to address, that there's like purse seiners sometimes get harassed by
People complain that boats are standing up.
Right, anglers.
Or just engine noise, engine noise amongst
Yeah.
gentrified waterfront property is an issue these days.
Yeah.
Anybody who spends a lot of money on the waterfront, then finds all sorts of things.
They do now.
Sorry. Yeah, they do now, exactly. Aubrey, we may want to follow up with you. You've done a little bit of work on that. We can try to see what's there. That makes sense?
I can share later on. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's great. Okay. All right. Other things that you would want to go into this report? And again, we need to start drafting and giving you probably an outline and then a draft in the new year. But other things on your minds right now? I think we'll include the vocal.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
Instead of reinventing the wheel, why did someone get a hold of Senator Tar's office and someone from Representative Ferrante's? They started this revolving fund. They've already started it. They already had it in the budget at one time. Figure out how we can continue. It's already there, already set up, ready to go, and money-wise in the state, not ready to go anymore. And figure out how we can continue on that and help, Suzanne actually lead the way with Dan to say, look, we need to stop this all over.
So Safadia,
Yes.
question, would you be willing to help? Let me try that again. Safadia, would you be willing to help just
Absolutely.
organize that? Okay, so we're gonna reach out to you, and if there's anybody here who knows Senator Tar's office well or wants to be, I think we need to have one of you on in that conversation.
Jackie.
Sure. So,
I'm sorry, did I mention your name?
just, and again, I think it's maybe one Zoom meeting, right? We're not, it's not gonna be onerous, but we just, if we, I think that's a good idea. We can do that, so.
But, the mention of the environmental bond bill, you know, if that's got its own schedule and it's on short time frame, then that's the kind of stuff that does need to get jammed into that before it gets finalized. So if there are those, because even if it's in the environmental bond bill, it doesn't mean that it gets funded.
Right.
However, I'm thinking more of a traditional sort of earmarks where funds are sort of, in an annual budget to do a certain thing. And my comments earlier were just warning us all that I've, what I've learned is you can't ask for something in February of the House because that's too late. In other words, the House members usually need to be, convincing leadership well in advance of what these things are. So, but the environmental bond bill is different.
That's different. That's the revolving loan type.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I know Sabathia is gonna track the other thing down, but still, we should think of the bond bill piece of it. But what you're talking about, Dan, I heard is like studies to support the work of the, analyses, right?
Well,
That
that's
type
what's
of-
in this document.
Right, that's more operational, but that's more the budget.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It could be both.
It could be, I mean,
But you're right.
I guess.
all right, let me just note that. Dan, there were two questions. So it raises the question, do you have support to support this commission finances, or do we need to go to the legislature for support for the commission itself?
Oh, we got the earmark last year that we'd love to, have repeated in the future years so that we can enjoy your company.
Yes. Well, I guess that motivates us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And lunch, which was the Senator Tar earmark.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that earmark was through June, through.
It's the fiscal year, which ends June 30th.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
so we may want to, if that's appropriate, we would include that in the house.
Oh, absolutely. Should
The
be the
other,
first thing we ask
the
for.
other thing is membership. So the legislature, kind of created this group. We've got roughly, what we see, Abby, 17 members?
Yes.
17, and then the question is there, I think we can make recommendations to add people, it would have to be legislative because it's the commission. But I'm just curious if we have missing interests in terms of the fishing community in Massachusetts, missing organizations, things that we would want to add in membership to. And that's a question, people can give us some thoughts after, but we'd love to just see if there's any ideas for that.
For additional members.
For additional members, exactly. For additional members. Is there any other kind of group? Got decent north-south representation, got Cape Cod representation.
One group I can think of is the Martha's Vineyard group, Shelley Edmondson's group, the Commercial Fishermen's Preservation Trust. Yeah, that'd be a good one to get on.
We don't have aquaculture.
We don't have aquaculture since it's the Commercial Fisheries Commission. Do we want aquaculture?
That could dilute it even more. I'm not suggesting.
Right. Sorry.
Why don't we think about that and
Okay.
make recommendations to you?
All right, so yeah, if you guys have specific thoughts, this is about adding, not subtracting.
Mhm.
But we certainly can have a few more people, we'll be fine, numbers wise. So people have thoughts, Dan just suggested one, if you have others, let us know. So we can kind of just flesh that out.
We also have a few spots that were never.
Do you remember which ones those were?
Yeah, so it may be subtract, right? If the organizations don't exist anymore or something like that, because we
Yeah.
have some people that have never.
So
shown.
that was the New Bedford Fishing Heritage,
They basically said no, thank you.
and then the Offshore Mariners Wives Association was listed originally. And
Doesn't
then,
exist now.
and then the Center for Sustainable Fisheries we have Pamela, but we haven't.
I don't know if that
heard from-
organization exists anymore either. You reached out to her and she never responded.
We had an interview with her actually, but she hasn't been to a meeting.
Yeah, she's not visiting. So, the other, I think everyone else is active here in an organization. So I think if they're, again, if the organizations that are kind of gone, we maybe just need to take them off the roster.
Yeah.
And then we need to add folks who are active, thriving organizations who can support this work.
It's not dispositive, but the New Bedford Port Director learned of the commercial sustainable fisheries, whatever it is, in the legislation. Like I had never heard of it before. So.
Yeah.
So if you have other thoughts, let us know. Okay. And we want to do a little bit of cleaning up the roster. Yeah, all right. Okay. Anything else on this before we just do a quick wrap? Friday, if you're looking about the traffic. Okay, so Abby, what else? Is there anything else we were supposed to? I guess we do leave time for a bit of public comment. So is there anybody online who wants to make a public comment? And if so, I'll look at the attendees. And I see 2 hands up, so can we move? How do we do that?
Yeah.
Or can I do that? All right, so Valerie, I'm gonna go to you first. Try to keep your comments to as concise as you can, but I'm gonna say allow you to talk and you should be able to, Valerie, you should be able to speak.
Thank you, Pat. I just want to say I had an excellent meeting. Thank you so much to hear from everyone, especially from Gloucester, just tremendous ideas. So a couple of things. I think, again, as I said at the first meeting, urgency. If you look at it like a legislative schedule is 2 years out or whatever, everyone's jostling now for attention from the governor and the legislature on budgeting and these bond bills. And anything you can get to them as soon as possible, I think is the right way to approach it. On the how to break down the data, I think you heard from Maine and certainly Jack Wiggins at UMass. If you look at farming and fishing around the country, you go port by port. And that's what Maine said, is every local port is different. And therefore, I think that, Gloucester needs focused attention for the unique circumstances of Gloucester. And so does New Bedford and Cape Cod and Boston. So that's how I think the focus of state funding and attention should be port by port. And there's a lot of evidence that is really what they do all over the country. I'd say a missing thing in there is the whole notion of the economy having value-added product potential that is not supported enough. Gloucester has Neptune's Harvest, it has smoked fish, it has even fish sticks for dogs or whatever, and that any funding program should not just be for docks and piers and fishing promotional and boats, but for value-added product development. And that's, I think, an element to be included. And I absolutely support go to Congress. And if Gordon is already going and Maine's going for a working waterfront bill, weigh in as soon as possible to try to get that passed through through the Congress. And I think that someone like Senator Markey is on committees, but he needs to hear forceful messages. And finally, with working waterfronts, someone to add to your committee is Kristen Uterwerk at the Urban Harbors Institute, who is in control of national working waterfront conferences that pull in Alaska and California fishing communities. And I would recommend you add her. And thank you for letting me speak.
And Valerie, is she at UMass Boston?
Yes.
Okay.
Urban Harbors Institute, Kristen Uterwerk is all over working waterfronts and could add a tremendous amount to your commission, I think.
Great, Valerie, thank you so much. Okay, next we're going to go to Martellaro Lobster. So see if that, okay.
Hi, thank you very much. I do represent Martellaro Lobster, which is a wholesale lobster company in the Port of Gloucester within the DPA. We do a lot of what I learned is the new term, belly cargo. I also serve on the Fishermen's Wives Board with Safathia and Angela. I speak from that, and I'm a newly elected city council in Gloucester. Just for background, food security is national security. Our food supplies on land and sea are greatly disrupted right now. We must ensure that we have a good food supply to feed this nation. fish is amongst that clean protein. It is vital to keep these small boats and small family businesses working, or the alternative will be a corporate model. DPA. The DPA, I fully understand what they've done with that is, as Vito pointed out, they've really restricted our development rights without a compensation. So that's really important to understand. We've given up our right. We understand the protection that it provides us to work within the marine industrial sector and within the industrial port. But the state brought in the DPAs in Massachusetts with promise of funding. We've got to find a mechanism to fund this infrastructure. Vito and Mortal Hour Lobster had been party to a community development corporation at one point. There was $7 million allocated or identified, at least in an environmental bond bill, and it went nowhere. After 3 years of working on it, the state, or however it fell apart, it fell apart. We've got to get state partners here. We have to support this infrastructure. Once it's gone, you lose it. There's a lot of, Safathi pointed out, marinas everywhere. The recreational sector is our biggest pressure. Tourism is a big pressure. We understand the coexistence with both. However, in Gloucester right now, I just want you to make aware, in the next, starting in January, they're going to do a visioning project on our largest parcel, our keystone property of I-4C2. It's been a vacant property year after year. We must get the state to help us with economic development on that property. Right now, the best solution is we're going to keep it for retail parking. We cannot allow that. This visioning process must result in some kind of project. And I don't mean shopping malls or theaters, which are always proposed there. It needs to be protected for the marine industrial, working waterfronts, boats, whatever it is. But we need clarity on that. We probably need assistance on that. Mass Development is the technical assistance person on that. So we're going to be hopeful that something really starts to work there. And in enforcement in our ports, there's every excuse and workaround why we have picnic boats with striped bass permits that they claim are, can dock in this DPA until every commercial vessel is docked and off the wait list. None of that should happen. We have every official pointing fingers at the next guy where they're supposed to enforce it, and it doesn't happen. I really do, I know it's not DMF's place here, but CZM and DEP, somebody's got to straighten this out. We have pressures and they're not being addressed. That might be a little local and I apologize, but it's important. The Chapter 91 permitting process, Mortal Hour Lobster, almost 10 years ago now, has the largest and most expensive port infrastructure in the Port of Gloucester. It was a necessity. We did it, but the permitting process in Chapter 91 was 18 months alone. The permitting process has to be streamlined for these working waterfronts. It's not only expensive, but time is money, and it was very time consuming. I don't know, but in July, CZM and DEP released a port profile study. And there's a lot of analysis on that. I hope that is something that you're aware of and bring forward I wasn't aware you're doing a port analysis as well, but that CZM DEP port analysis might be just a baseline to look at or help with that. Where are we? Small businesses. Yeah, they need help. This idea you can't put state, certainly federal money into private property, again, within the DPA. There should be a state workaround on that. Loans are fine, but it isn't the answer. We've sacrificed our property rights willingly for the protections, but we need the infrastructure. NOAA right now is looking at science and management risk analysis, and we're very hopeful that they will look at these management factors and science factors and increase the total allowable catch. I hope someone is following that. I'm kind of thinking Jackie might be involved in that. But
Suspect she is.
great, okay, that's good. We know they work hard. Tools for economic development, marketing, Gloucester has done a Gloucester Fresh analysis program, but the value-added products that Valerie mentions are really where the economic development happens. So the legislators, Massachusetts legislators, we have been following what Maine's done with the Working Waterfront Initiative, really important work, and our governors and representatives, Warren and Markey, access is a problem, and we need to get them to the table and listen to us. We work on the ground, we know the work, we're successful business people. We provide to the economy of the city and the state, and we'd like to get a better handle on working with the legislators in this seafood industry. So I really appreciate you giving me this time. Thank you very much, and I hope we can work towards a better Port of Gloucester anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Okay, so Commission, we have a report draft to get out to you all. We have some focus groups to keep working. We'll have a summary that Bradley Nicely does for this group, and some work really next year to lay out to cover a lot of things as it's starting to move to dialogue, moving toward action. Ed.
I don't know if it's appropriate time for this, but a couple of comments. The video trawl survey that SMAS has is in danger of not happening in January. It's state funded. I understand it's now it's in its 13th year. Developing a time series is always what NOAA scientists are always squawking about. We're in danger of losing that time series of all the important work that this video trawl survey has done. And it can't wait. You can't now say, okay, let's do it in February, because in February, in the areas that they've done it in, there won't be any fish there. So I don't know who's in charge of who needs to move the money to make that happen. But Dan, if you could do that, if you could facilitate that.
We were given permission from the governor to pass the funds to SMAS from our annual earmark, and we're moving the same number of dollars we did last year, and we're waiting for a statement of work. So I don't know why. I have not heard that the survey is going to be canceled. It's news to us.
I can tell you.
Where did you get that information?
I got that information from my brother, who has been part of that survey.
Sure. Well, it's been postponed because
January survey is not going to happen tonight.
well, the money hadn't been released till October, and then we about a month ago we sent a message to SMAS here saying, you can go.
I've even heard that the owner of the vessel that they use, they charter, was willing to put up the money up front as long as he was guaranteed that it would.
Yeah, well, it's in their shop.
But
it's in their shop.
Well, someone needs.
It's in SMAS shop.
Someone needs to. I don't.
He just stepped out.
I don't think.
I don't know, but it's in his shop.
You have to make up this
There's nothing
random-
that DMF can do. There's nothing this group can do at this point. It's in his shop, Eddie.
Well, I don't think that Kevin feels it's in his shop.
How about someone give Kevin a call?
How about we take it up after the meeting?
Yeah, I think we need to kind of close the circle on this, because it sounds like there may be a miscommunication. So I
Can
wonder.
I just jump in and say, we totally support that research, and whatever the hiccup is, hopefully it gets resolved, because it is really an important component of the information that we're collecting, especially when it has the time series that it has. So I think we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on the data that's been collected out of that program, which hopefully we can even put our minds together and really think about how to create more value out of all that's been collected there. But
Aubrey, did you want to add anything to this topic?
No, a different topic.
Okay, well, hold on one second. Okay, no problem. So I think,
I think it's really critical to say, forget about the time series. That's one strong thing about it. It's a direct measurement of the minimum fish that goes through that net. You know that that's the minimum amount of fish that's out there. We have scaling issues in our assessments that could be off by an order of magnitude, and there's no way to ground truth them. And that video series, what goes through the net, is the minimum that exists. You can't get a better ground truth than that. It was rejected at the last assessment because it actually showed there was the same amount of fish in 13% of the area than was in the entire area, right? Just of what they towed
The
through.
entire western Gulf.
But it wasn't peer reviewed completely. It wasn't totally ready. We don't want to see an interruption in that series because the Science Center at some point is going to have to uptake that information and say, maybe we got to rescale the biomass to a level that's at reality, and then do the relative changes from there. That requires a time series. Direct measurement of swept area biomass does not. It's instantaneous, and it's the only survey we've ever had that attempts to do that. So
Dan, it sounds like maybe if DMF can circle back to Kevin and figure out whatever the hiccup is.
and we totally understand it's not in Dan's camp, right? That if it's in SMAS camp, they've got to get the scope of work to him. But this group, I hope, understand that I fully support it. I mean, we live and breathe this stuff, and it's like.
Saying the funding, Dan said the funding's there, so now it's not.
It's the paper.
It goes, I thought that maybe maybe the hang up is that it goes through the Marine Fisheries Institute, maybe?
It's an ISA, it's an ISA between us and SMAS.
Okay.
And on November 21st, I have emails here going back and forth. And we're asking SMAS to just give us a scope of work because it was just days earlier that we were able to get permission and say, all right, now go forward. The funding's been released.
Does it have to happen before February? Ed's saying that February it's too late. Is it?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I mean, Kevin, that'd be Kevin.
Kevin's saying.
All right, so.
And I have one more comment.
Yes, and then will you have one more comment? Then I'll be.
Not about that. This goes back to shoreside infrastructure. It is, from what I understand, on the Boston Fish Pier, the New England Fish Exchange is now going to be leased to a restaurant. And the place that was formerly the No Name Restaurant is supposedly going to be leased to a tech firm. So, it's, and, I mean, we've beaten that horse a bit today anyway, but that is an example of a limited amount of space becoming even less. And for the businesses that whether it's Red's Best or Atlantic Coast or the Patinas or any of those people that added amount of traffic down there is going to definitely negatively affect any businesses that are on the Boston Fish Pier.
Aubrey, final point.
Thank you. Just if people are not aware, I was contacted by John Bean. He's with Ocean Surveys, and in 2023 they performed a hydrographic survey tasked by NOAA in order to modernize and the depth data to update their nautical charts. And he told me that they're looking at another nautical charting project likely to take place this winter with a sizable portion of Cape Cod Bay. The exact survey has not been finalized yet, so he's reaching out to industry folks, but I just wanted people to be aware of that. I know they were trying to make sure that it wouldn't conflict with lobster gear, and I know there'll be the closures because of right whales, but I think there was also some concerns with the clam fleet. So I just wanted to let everyone know in case you had connections, but he will likely be reaching out to industry reps about that. But this is usually hired by NOAA, and it's to modernize the depth data and update their nautical chart. So I just wanted to let people know. And then lastly, December 15th, so Monday, is the last for you to provide any written comments. I know it's not state related, but federal in terms of restoring American seafood competitiveness. And so if you want to document any challenges specific fisheries are facing, talk about modernizing alternative gear technologies, cooperative research, I think this is our last chance. So I wanted people to be aware.
All right, good. Thanks for the updates and the issues raised. All right, good. So, all right, thank you all very much. I think we can officially adjourn. Yes, and safe travels, happy holidays.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for those online. Appreciate you staying on as long as you did.
Yeah, I was wondering if you got one, like, I got distracted, I wasn't sure. I might today. Actually, really warm. Hey. And I have another one. Oh, that's another one. You guys didn't say mine?
You guys have.
No.
Go around.